Chapter 39:13. He didn't know what to say after such a thing happened. The little crown princess didn't have a good relationship with the Mu family, but now the Mu family was in such a miserable state that anyone who saw it would feel uncomfortable. Moreover, based on his observations along the way, the little crown princess was clearly a stubborn and soft-hearted little fellow. She wouldn't be happy with the Mu family in such a state. Arbor glanced at Fong Su and nodded. She casually instructed him, then pulled Prince Mo to the mountain gate. After entering the Mu family's mountain gate, Arbor frowned and whispered, "Should we call eldest brother back? I've already sent a message to eldest brother." After such a big thing happened, it was naturally not good to hide it from Mu Xingqian. If he didn't tell him after finding out about such a big thing, wouldn't he be upset for no reason? Arbor nodded and didn't think too much about it. As she walked over, she saw that the flowers and trees were all stained with blood. The corpses should have been cleaned up by the guards, but the bloodstains were all left behind. Arbor and Emolien walked all the way to the main hall. She stood there with lowered eyes and thought for a moment, then shook her head and said, "That's not right." "What's not right?" Emolien lowered her head and asked her. "The bloodstains are not right." Emolien blinked and then nodded in understanding. "You're saying that the Mu family has more than 1,000 people, but the bloodstains outside are less than 100 people?" Arbor nodded and looked up at her husband with sparkling eyes. Her husband was always the first to understand Sir Jojo's meaning. He was very smart. "Then where are the Mu family hiding at this moment? Ask old man Chaoyang, he should know." "Can we still enter Chaoyang Pavilion?" Arbor immediately frowned. "That's right. We can't enter Chaoyang Pavilion yet." But after knowing that most of the Mu family was actually fine, she wasn't so anxious. As the saying goes, good people don't live long, but scourges live for 10,000 years. The Mu family was probably like this. Arbor snorted. "Forget it. We'll talk about it when Big Brother comes." Arbor tugged at Emolien's hand and said, "Big Brother should know about the tunnels and secret places here." She was too lazy to open the talisman to look for those people, so she just let them hide inside for a few more days. From the looks of it, they were probably scared out of their wits by Tianyun's people. But it made sense. How could a great talisman clan that had been passed down for 1,000 years not have any methods to protect the lives of its disciples? They had worried for nothing. When Fong Su saw the two of them come out not long after entering, he couldn't help but ask in a daze, "Crown Prince, Crown Princess, have you returned to the palace?" Arbor nodded. "I haven't seen my father for a long time. Let's go and see him." Fong Su's mouth twitched. It was a little strange that the little crown princess was suddenly so sensible. Emolien couldn't help but laugh out loud. "I'll send a message to Big Brother and tell him not to worry. Things shouldn't be as serious as we think." Arbor nodded non-committally. He glanced at Fong Su and casually tossed him a pill. "I see that you're about to advance. This is a level 10 spirit breakthrough pill. How did it feel to suddenly be hit by a pie that fell from the sky?" It was exactly this feeling right now. Fong Su turned his head dumbly and stared blankly for a long while before shouting at the young couple's departing figures, "Many thanks to the Crown Princess, many thanks to Your Highness the Crown Prince." The group of small guards who were whispering beside him all looked at their commander with envious eyes. Commander Fong is really lucky. Chapter 39:14. Mo Lusheng was a bit speechless as he gazed at the young couple sitting in his study. "Here." The little fellow threw a small jar of ointment in front of the emperor and cast him a sidelong glance. "If you have a headache, just pick your fingernail and smear it on your temples. In the future, don't use that shoddy powder of Madame Gua's to drive away the pain. Treating the symptoms but not the root cause. The more it is treated, the more inferior it is." The veins on the emperor's forehead pulsed faintly, and he silently put the item back into his inner world. He asked his son and daughter-in-law coldly, "You went to see the Mu residence? How is the situation there?" "It's all right." The little fellow's tone really made the emperor wish for nothing more than to slap her to death. Glancing at his son, who was glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey, the emperor pressed between his brows and asked speechlessly, "How exactly is it?" "They probably used a talisman matrix to transport them out." Or they hid in an underground talisman matrix that we didn't discover. The little stoic expressionlessly stated. Then she said, "It won't be too late for Royal Father to summon them to clarify the situation when they are willing to crawl out of their rat hole." Mo Lusheng speechlessly glanced at the little fellow. He was certain that if the Mu family's patriarch was sitting here and heard the little fellow say, "rat hole," he definitely wouldn't be in a good mood. How much did she despise the Mu family? The Mu family is just like that. They walk the path of the middle and shrink back in whatever they do. They don't even dare to stand up for their wife's family when others bully them. That's right. Prince Mo immediately nodded in solidarity with a common enemy. Our Mo family absolutely won't be like this. The Emperor, just how strong is your desire to live? The little lady didn't beat around the bush to criticize you, yet you just had to blurt out this sentence. The Emperor missed his wife a bit again. How did he feel stifled when he kept seeing his son and daughter-in-law flaunting their affection in front of him? The little stoic then took out a small box from her inner world and tossed it to the Emperor. This is a phoenix flower. As long as you refine it into a liquid, add a drop every time you refine pills, and you can guarantee a 100% success rate. Mo Lusheng was instantly excited, and his stern face couldn't be maintained. He looked joyfully at Arbor. Is that the meaning? It's not what you think. With this flower ground into juice, even if it's a soul-returning pill, the success rate can reach 100%. Arbor said indifferently, "In 2 days, I will be able to make the soul-returning pill." Really? Mo Lusheng excitedly stood up. Xiao Mu nodded faintly. With the phoenix flower in hand, refining something like a resurrection pill above her level was a piece of cake. Mo Lusheng immediately turned his gaze to his son. Mo Lien pouted unhappily. "Of course it's true. Xiao wouldn't joke about this. You're not allowed to doubt my wife." Mo Lusheng laughed loudly. Good. The great emperor's laughter alerted Hu Dequan, who was standing outside the door. Eunuch who staggered and almost lost his balance. What did he hear? The great emperor was actually laughing so happily? How many years had it been since the great emperor laughed so heartily? A trace of joy surfaced in Eunuch Hu's heart. It looked like the crown princess and His Highness the Crown Prince brought some exceptionally good news to the great emperor. "I think the godly realm's advancement should be completed in these 2 days," Arbor said softly as he held Mo Lien's hand on the carriage heading to the Eastern Palace. Chapter 39:15. When the time comes, I'll go to Fish Orchid Planet to refine the pill. I can also save some time. Moreover, that place will definitely be rich in divine energy, so it'll be convenient for me to replenish my divine energy at any time while refining the pill. Mo Lien gazed at his wife tenderly. As she spoke, he listened and nodded repeatedly. His wife had thought of everything just so that they could succeed in refining the soul-returning pill on the first try. "Don't worry, even if we can't do it the first time, we'll definitely be able to refine it a few more times. You and your mother will be able to see each other very soon." "Jojo." Mo Lien pulled her into his arms and gently caressed her soft little face. "It's my fortune to be able to hold hands with you in this life." Arbor tilted her head and pinched his cheek. "What silly things are you saying?" She nuzzled in his arms and suddenly giggled. "Mother will definitely call you little glutinous dumpling, right? You must have looked strong and chubby when you were young. Just thinking about it makes me a little cute." Mo Lien. The two returned to the Eastern Palace hand in hand to rest. Before going to bed, Arbor recalled something and instructed Li to call Chen Yi over tomorrow. She thought of some things, so she still planned to clarify them. Song Prefecture. The water veins that meandered like jade slowly flowed past, following the current towards the direction of the Sea of Forgetfulness. Rushing forward without turning back, it had been raining in the Imperial City for the past few days. The continuous drizzle was like a faint mist that dissipated with the wind the moment it touched the body. Duan Yu walked towards noble consort Duan's residence with a smile while holding a small brocade box. He thought to himself, "I haven't seen my mother for a long time, so I must properly coax her later." In the winding corridor, a cool breeze accompanied by the drizzle slid past his handsome face. Hurried footsteps came from behind him. Duan Yu glanced to the side, and a long purple robe slowly brushed across the ground. Behind him, little Kazi and Aunt Yuan-jin hurried over. Both of their faces were slightly pale. Xiao Kezi even went up to stop him without thinking. "Your Highness, where are you going so early in the morning?" Duan Yu glanced at him suspiciously before replying aloofly, "Of course I'm going to see Mother." Aunt Yuan-jin was not as flustered as Xiao Kezi. She took a few steps forward, steadied herself, and bowed in greeting. "Your Highness, it's still early. Imperial Consort Nyang might not have woken up yet. Moreover, you've been traveling for several days and only returned to the palace late last night. It's better for you to return to the Limitless Palace and rest for 2 days before going to greet." The more Aunt Yuan-jin spoke, the softer her voice became. She almost didn't dare to meet the man's sharp gaze. Duan Yu tilted his head slightly, his doubtful gaze circling the two of them. "You're obstructing us in every way possible, but did something happen?" He was a very intelligent person. A change in the expression of the palace maids and eunuchs around him could immediately attract his attention. Duan Yu's heart tightened, and he coldly berated, "Move aside." Xiao Zi scrambled to his knees and hugged his leg. He anxiously said, Your Highness, don't go, don't go. Don't, Your Highness. I beg you, don't go." Xiao Zi wept bitterly as he hugged his leg, but Duan Yu stubbornly dragged him along. Aunt Yuan-jin turned her head slightly and secretly wiped the corners of her eyes with her sleeve. She braced herself with reddened eyes and stepped forward. "Your Highness, please listen to this servant. Even if you go to the Imperial Consort bedchamber right now, you won't be able to find her." Duan Yu abruptly turned his head. "Hurry and hand over all your monthly tickets." Chapter 39:16. Duan Yu abruptly turned his head, and his icy gaze landed on Yuan-jin. His voice trembled, and his brows furrowed. He enunciated each word clearly. "My mother, where is she?" Yuan-jin heavily kowtowed to the ground and replied in a trembling voice, "I don't dare to deceive your Highness. Her Majesty is currently in the Imperial Mausoleum on Lonely Mountain. She has been buried." Duan Yu staggered and nearly fell backwards. Xiao Kezi, who was hugging his leg, hastily reached out to stop him and called out in a trembling voice, "Your Highness." Duan Yu shook his head and tightly gripped the small brocade box in his hand. His complexion instantly turned as white as a sheet. "You're lying." He coldly muttered these 3 words over and over again. Soon after, he harshly shouted, "You're lying. This servant doesn't dare to deceive your Highness." Yuan-jin heavily kowtowed to the ground again and said with tears in his eyes, "You're lying." Duan Yu harshly shouted and retreated several steps. He abruptly turned around and rushed out. He casually pulled over a spirit horse under the corridor and galloped away. His long purple robes glided in the wind, leaving behind an arc of shadow. "Your Highness! Your Highness!" Xiao Kezi immediately scrambled up in a panic and ran after him in a panic. He hastily turned around and shouted to the group of dumbstruck eunuchs behind him, Quickly report to His Majesty. Quickly find guards to follow His Highness." Duan Yu galloped out of the Imperial Palace and urged his horse towards the Imperial City's north gate. His fingers gripped the reins, and his knuckles were slightly white. His pair of peach blossom eyes, which were as gentle as water, were currently flashing with intense anxiety and disbelief. Impossible, he didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. He had even seen his mother before he left the palace for Phoenix Grove. At that time, his mother was still fine and completely fine. What kind of joke was this? Why would a perfectly fine person need to be buried? They must be deceiving him. He galloped towards the city's north gate, and a group of Featherwood guards galloped behind him. They repeatedly shouted at the city gate, "Quickly open the city gate! Quickly open the city gate! His Highness Prince Chen has left the city." It was still early, and a large group of people had gathered outside the city gates, waiting to enter and exit the city. After the sound of horse hooves rang out in the morning light, everyone subconsciously retreated to the 2 sides. The rotating shaft of the city gate creaked as the heavy gate was pushed open to both sides by the city guards. Everyone looked back and saw a young man dressed in purple with a black horsewhip in his hand. He was handsome and graceful as he took the lead and rushed out of the city gate. Bush, 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 bush. A large group of Featherwood guards immediately went out to catch up with the spirit horse in front of them. After a long time, the dazed crowd finally let out a series of soft exclamations and exclamations. "Who is that?" A gentle voice came from a small green sedan by the side of the road. The maid stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Miss, it was Prince Chin who passed by just now." "What a handsome and elegant Prince Chin." Two jade-like fingers gently lifted the curtain of the sedan chair, and her gaze slowly looked towards the city gate. The young man's figure was nowhere to be seen. He had already left. Duan Yu galloped out of the north gate, and the light drizzle in the air rolled into beads and connected into a line, gradually becoming heavier. He had no time to care about anything else. His fingers tightly gripped the reins, and his thin lips were tightly pursed as he looked down at the small brocade box in his hand. Chapter 39:17. Mother, son has returned. Mother, you must wait for son. Duan Yu spurred his horse to gallop wildly, not caring if the cold rain gradually increased in intensity. He only felt that his entire body was ice cold, and his face was also inexplicably damp. "Your Highness! Your Highness!" The Featherwood Guard commander galloped over and tried his best to persuade while shouting, "Your Highness, the rain is too heavy. How about we wait?" The rain was so heavy, so going up the mountain right now really felt like asking for trouble. However, Duan Yu turned a deaf ear to their voices and urged his horse up the mountain. Halfway up, a small mudslide occurred due to the torrential downpour, so he simply abandoned his spirit horse and continued to gallop up the mountain path. How could anyone dare to avert their eyes? They could only stare intently at the purple-robed figure before them. How could they keep up with his sudden burst of speed? The group of people also hurriedly abandoned their horses in a panic and followed His Highness up the mountain with flying steps, shouting, "Your Highness! Your Highness!" At this time, Duan Yu couldn't hear anything. The sound of wind, rain, and shouting were all no longer in his world. Only a sheet of pale white remained in the world before his eyes. White, white, everything was white, so white that it was dazzling to the eye. The several hundred people in front were busy with the noble consort's burial. Some were weeping, while others were singing, and all of them appeared extremely pious as they prostrated on the ground. But he couldn't see a single one of them. Duan Yu only saw a coffin placed in the center and 2 rows of guards standing ramrods straight in front of the imperial mausoleum. At this moment, the wind and rain seemed to be especially silent. Duan Yu's body swayed, and the small brocade box he tightly clutched in his hand also crashed into the rain with a bang. Tears that had not been shed for a long time flowed freely and silently. That pair of beautiful eyes that usually flowed with extraordinary splendor was now gray and desolate, as if a gust of wind could push them heavily to the ground. Everyone was stunned. Perhaps they didn't expect His Highness the 4th Prince to suddenly appear. His sudden appearance caught them off guard. Duan Yu staggered over from the kneeling crowd like a wandering soul. He extended a pale finger and slowly brushed it across his mother's coffin before heavily kneeling on the ground. "Your Highness!" Noble consort Duan's personal old nanny, Lin Shi, instantly threw herself in front of him and sobbed, "You're finally back. Thank the heavens and earth that you were able to rush over and send off the imperial concubine on her last journey." Mother Lin was sobbing uncontrollably. However, Duan Yu turned a deaf ear and only gently pushed open the coffin lid. As he gazed at his mother's peaceful sleeping face, his lustrous tears landed on the back of his mother's hand with a plop. "Mother," Duan Yu sobbed as he leaned against the coffin. "Son has returned. Mother, your son is back." He reached out his hands, wanting to carry his mother out of the coffin. Mother Lin and the others hurriedly stopped him. "Your Highness, her ladyship is about to be buried, Your Highness." "Mother, your son is back." Duan Yu forcefully pushed aside the countless hands around him and insisted on carrying noble consort Duan out of the coffin. He hugged her tightly in his arms and said in a choked voice, "Mother, your son has returned. Your Highness, my condolences. The Empress had already passed away. Please let Her Highness leave in peace. Your Highness. Liar. You're all lying. Duan Yu forcefully pushed away Mother Lin and the other's arms and shouted harshly, My mother didn't die, my mother won't die. Where are the pill alchemists? Where are the physicians? I want to find the best pill alchemists in the world. They can definitely save my mother. Chapter 39:18. Duan Yu hastily stood up with noble consort Duan in his arms. As if recalling something, he shouted sternly, Prepare the carriage, prepare the carriage. I want the fastest flying spirit beast in all of Tsang province. I want to go to the divine province, I want to go to the divine province. Find Jojo to save his mother. Even if the whole world couldn't save his mother, Jojo definitely could. Jojo would definitely help him, she would definitely help him. Resurrection pill. The resurrection pill will definitely save my mother. The resurrection pill will definitely, Your Highness. Nanny Lin knelt on the ground while weeping bitterly. She tightly hugged the corner of Duan Yu's robe and stammered, Her Highness is only a normal person. She's gone, she's gone. She's long gone, and her soul has scattered. Nanny Lin had never heard of that resurrection pill, but she presumed that it must be a cultivator's superb resurrection method. But Her Highness noble consort Duan was only a normal person. It was useless for normal people to eat any kind of pill. At most, they could eat some pills to extend their lifespan while they were alive. As for after death, cultivators could recover their souls. Where would normal people recover their souls? Duan Yu staggered and fell next to the coffin. He hugged his mother in a daze. Your Highness, Your Highness. Duan Yu shook his head and hugged noble consort Duan's icy body. His tears dripped onto his mother's face. Mother, don't abandon your son, Duan Yu murmured softly. As he hugged noble consort Duan's icy body, he forcefully pushed away the hands of others who came to support him. Don't abandon your son, mother. Duan Yu shook his head. Don't abandon your son, mother, don't abandon me. Duan Yu shook his head again and muttered pitifully, I'm all alone now. He lowered his head and hugged noble consort Duan horizontally with both hands. His entire body was curled up next to the coffin. He was as lonely as a wandering little beast, making one's heart uncontrollably break. Your Highness, don't be like this, Your Highness. Her Highness won't be able to leave in peace with you like this, Your Highness. Duan Yu pressed his head tightly against noble consort Duan's head, as if he could feel that his mother's breathing had not stopped. Like this. As if he could be closer to his mother. He pushed away Mother Lin's hand and stubbornly hugged his mother. He shook his head, then shook his head again. No matter how cold the rain was, it couldn't be colder than his heart right now. Thunder rumbled in the sky, and heavy rain poured down. Those madams wearing straw raincoats were secretly complaining incessantly. He then stole a glance at the fourth prince and couldn't help but sigh. According to the records of later generations, the four sons of Emperor Tsang were exceptionally gifted and intelligent. When his mother, imperial concubine Duan, passed away, the fourth prince held her coffin and cried for 3 days and 3 nights in the imperial mausoleum. He observed mourning for 30 days and did not leave the imperial mausoleum. His filial piety could set an example for the world. The dividing line of my oak. After Qin Yu walked through the door, he bowed. Qin Yu greets the crown princess. Chen Kuei, between you and I, master and servant, there is no need for such formalities. Take a seat. The little crown princess pointed to the seat below and said indifferently. Chen Kuei agreed with a smile. He looked up and carefully examined the little crown princess before praising, The crown princess looks increasingly radiant these days. Did the trip to Phoenix Grove go very smoothly? The little crown princess pursed her lips. It didn't go smoothly at all. But that's all in the past. The little crown princess harumphed. In any case, no one can truly harm me. Chen Kuei immediately nodded jubilantly. The crown princess herself is valiant. My crown prince consort is a firecracker. Chapter 39:19. In the future, even if I have to go to a dangerous place to train, this old servant can rest assured. I'm sure Mrs. Spirit in heaven must be very happy." Arbor grunted, took the teacup handed to her by the little palace maid, and raised her eyes to ask, "I'm sure you know about the Mu family." Chen-Yi nodded. "I went to the Mu family's ancestral temple yesterday. The ancestral temple's gate was tightly locked. I thought I couldn't break it at will, so I didn't go there to disturb them." Xiao Mu remarked dryly, "Where exactly did that bunch of old fellows and little fellows from the Mu clan hide? Do you know what to do?" Before she went to bed yesterday, she thought that Chen-Yi might know which mouse hole the Mu family would hide in to take refuge, so today she specially called her over to ask. The ancestral temple is protected by the strongest talisman array. Fortunately, little Miss didn't break it violently, otherwise she would have suffered some hardship. Arbor was somewhat disapproving. With the Mu family's talisman technique, it was indeed difficult to make her suffer. Chen-Yi said with a smile, "I know where they are hiding. The Mu family has always had an underground secret room all these years. I know, the Mu family dug many secret passages. Previously, the fifth madam of the Mu family used them to trick her sister-in-law, Mu Dongni," Arbor said expressionlessly. Chen-Yi, her little miss, despised the Mu family. She could even remember these miscellaneous trifles clearly. Chen-Yi coughed and quickly changed the topic with a smile. "Miss, do you want to go? Chen-Yi can take you to check it out." Arbor nodded. "I wanted to wait for Big Brother to come back and let him find the Mu family in the underground cave. Now that I think about it, it's better to find them as soon as possible, lest they starve to death in the mouse hole when Big Brother comes back." Chen-Yi, little miss, felt uncomfortable if she didn't say something mean to the Mu family every 3 sentences. The little girl was mainly afraid that after the advancement of the divine realm, Ancestor Chaoyang would cry and make a fuss at her when he found out about it. The main thing was that Ancestor Chaoyang was too annoying. That's good. "When is little miss going?" "Let's have breakfast," Arbor said faintly. Early in the morning, the crown prince was invited by the great emperor. She thought that since she had nothing to do, she might as well go and greet the Mu family. "Chen-Yi, you haven't eaten yet, right? Let's eat together." Chen-Yu respectfully bowed and saluted. Chen-Yu does not dare. Let Chen-Yu serve little Mississippi. The little guy had a natural fondness for food. She didn't have high standards for the taste of food, so the cooks in the Eastern Palace's small kitchen all felt that their little crown prince consort was quite considerate. Today's breakfast was 8 dishes of desserts and 4 dishes of porridge. This was already because the little crown princess had purposely ordered them to make fewer dishes. As such, this fellow wouldn't be able to finish everything in one go. "Chen-Yi, don't be so busy. Sit down and let's eat together." The little crown princess pointed at the seat beside her. After eating half a mouthful of a small bun and drinking a mouthful of porridge, the little crown princess asked expressionlessly, "Those who died should be the disciples of the Mu family's side branches, right? When they moved, they would definitely move the direct line of descent first." Although it was very cruel to say it, it was indeed something that every aristocratic family would do. Chen-Yi almost choked on the crown princess's cough. He quickly shook his head and laughed. At that time, it happened so suddenly that the old man probably didn't have the time to plan. Chapter 39:20. The implication was that the whole family might have gone to the underground secret room at that time, so there probably wasn't time for them to be divided into the main branch and concubine branches. "Oh." Arbor nodded indifferently. Over 100 Mu family members died. Arbor's eyes were indifferent. "After I went to take a look, I had the guards burn them. The arms of those corpses were all black. If they weren't burned, there's an 80% chance that the corpses would turn into corpses, which would be even more troublesome." Arbor didn't like trouble. Compared to solving problems, she preferred to idle around and drink tea and eat snacks. Chen-Yi pursed her lips into a smile. After interacting with her so many times, she already knew what kind of temperament her young miss had. She felt that this temperament was very good. Compared to the young miss's tenacity and indomitable spirit, the young miss seemed to be more mellow than her mother. Although she usually didn't speak much and had a seemingly cold temperament, her pair of eyes could see more clearly than anyone else. Her intelligence was truly admirable. I didn't see Mu Qingya's body, Arbor said expressionlessly. It wasn't that she had to curse Mu Qingya to die, but that she had paid more attention to this woman from beginning to end. The night attack on the Mu family was so sudden, and Arbor saw so many corpses, so she naturally went to the corpses to look for people she thought she was more familiar with. Mu Qingya wasn't among the corpses, which made her somewhat surprised and somewhat clear. After all, she was the former family head's wife. Even if she didn't have any martial prowess, she definitely had people protecting her. Mu Jingfeng had fallen from power, but the woman in charge of the Mu family still seemed to be Mu Qingya. Based on this point alone, it could be seen how powerful this woman's methods were. Her husband's meridians were half crippled, and he was now a cripple, but she could still firmly hold the power of the Mu family. Of course, the most important core power of the Mu family couldn't be handed to her, but at least Mu Qingya's position in the Mu family, whether Mu Jingfeng was present or not, was as stable as a mountain. Chen Yi couldn't help but twitch her lips. The more she looked at her young miss, the cuter she was. Just how much did she dislike Madame Mu? It should be said that the young crown prince consort didn't like anyone in the Mu family from top to bottom. First Madame is the Madame of the household. Naturally, there are hidden guards protecting her. Chen Kuei laughed and said, if she were to die, although the Mu family would not suffer a great loss, it would be quite troublesome for them to be in charge of the family. Xiao Mu nodded absent-mindedly. Although she doesn't have any cultivation and is only a normal girl, she is probably the only one in the entire Dragonflame City for an ordinary girl to be able to do what she did. Chen Kuei nodded. The eldest madam is truly very strong. She is a model for women. This old servant still remembers that not long after Madam's miscarriage, she rested for less than 3 days before taking charge of the Mu family's affairs again. Alas, all these years, if it weren't for her, I don't think the first branch would have any better days. Arbor put down the porridge spoon and glanced at Chen Ku. He caught the key word. Miscarriage? Doesn't Mu Qingya only have one daughter, Mu Roxuan? Chen Kuei's expression was slightly awkward. Your father, ever since he went to Qingya's courtyard to rape her after that hangover, he regarded her as his woman. Chapter 39-21. Xiao Mu expressionlessly nodded. So, after that, they were actually still hooking up until my mother's death? After Mu Qingya was married into the family, they were actually together the whole time, right? Chen Kuei nodded awkwardly and then said, Qingya is just a poor woman. With her little strength, how could she be your father's opponent? Even if she locked the door, these words weren't so pleasant to hear. The dignified Mu family's patriarch was actually a villain who sneaked into a woman's boudoir at night. No matter how this spread out, it would be a very embarrassing thing. Arbor sneered. Eldest Madam's daughter who miscarried should be 1 year younger than young Mississippi. If she was still alive, she should be 15 years old. Arbor's eyes were cold as he sneered. Just a pair of sluts. Chen Kuei was startled. He felt that Mu Qingya was wronged and wanted to defend her, but when he saw Arbor's icy face, he couldn't continue. You mean Mu Qingya was already pregnant when she married into the family? She miscarried not long after she married into the family? After all, didn't that bastard Mu Jingfeng officially marry Mu Qingya not long after her mother's death? And a lot of things happened that year. Chen Kuei nodded. Alas, young miss, eldest madam is really a poor woman. This old servant still remembers that second young miss was almost full term when she unexpectedly went into labor and gave birth to a stillborn. Chen Kuei shook his head. Eldest madam is really pitiful. At that time, her vitality was seriously damaged. Just like that, after a few days of rest, she forced herself to deal with the Mu family's affairs. Could it be that there's no one else in the Mu family besides Mu Qingya? Arbor coldly said, Mama, although you and Mother's cultivation is high, you have no control over people's hearts. Arbor sighed and didn't continue. Chen Kuei was startled and subconsciously glanced at his young Mississippi. Was the little crown princess thinking too much? The human heart? Arbor reached for a handkerchief and wrapped 4 exquisite pastries. He said expressionlessly, Let's go to the mouse hole of the Mu family and see them. Chen Yu, He felt that his little miss was increasingly disliking the Mu family. It was still early, and the morning breeze was gentle. Arbor and Chen Yi brought along Li Yi and Ao Yi, who had nothing to do, and headed to the Mu family in the Winter Moon Mountain Forest. On the Mu family's mountain path, the bloodstains were still there, but the guards had all withdrawn. They didn't meet anyone along the way up the mountain. It wasn't until they reached the empty mountain gate that Arbor stopped. In front of the Mu clan's wide mountain gate, the black-framed plaque with red words that was originally hanging in the middle had been swept to the ground and broken into 2 pieces. It looked a little bleak. Arbor stepped on the plaque and walked in expressionlessly. Everyone was speechless. Chen Kuei coughed lightly and very perceptively led the way. He led them all the way to a remote courtyard and pointed to a dry well in the courtyard. There's a passage down here. However, the Mu family has quite a lot of secret passages. This old servant really doesn't know if we can smoothly find them. Of course there's more than one mouse hole. Arbor sneered and then said to the group of purple forest guards behind him, "Dig it." Chapter 39:22. Yes. The purple forest guards responded in unison. They immediately took out shovels and shovels from their inner worlds and began to dig violently. Chen Kuei, after digging a large hole in the dried well, Arbor looked down and saw a flight of stone stairs along the wall. Chen Kuei once again volunteered to lead the way, leading the Crown Princess group down. The underground passage was only wide enough for one person to pass through, but the deeper they went, the wider it became. Chen Kuei's memory was very good. There were so many forks in this underground passage, but she could always find one and lead the group forward. It seemed that she had put in a lot of effort while staying in the Mu clan. At the very least, she wasn't the gloomy old woman who never left chasing Wind Garden. Chen Kuei leaned on the golden staff in her hand, which was covered with a small piece of black cloth, leaving only one eye visible. Her body had been recuperated recently, and she was much better now. Her movements were extremely nimble, and her large strides were as fast as the wind. After passing through a few forks in the road ahead, everyone seemed to smell a faint fishy smell. After walking for about half a quarter of an hour, Chen Yi raised his hand and stopped everyone. She turned to Arbor and said in a low voice, "Young miss, look." Arbor took a few steps forward, frowning slightly. There were several corpses lying in front of them. It seemed that they hadn't retreated in time and had been killed by some of the All-Seer's men. A purple forest guard stepped forward and looked through their clothes, then said in a low voice, "Crown Princess, there are 2 black-robed men with the symbol of the sun embroidered on their collars." Arbor frowned, then suddenly narrowed her eyes. A vine shot out from her sleeve and quickly pulled the purple forest guard back. With a whoosh, the purple forest guard was instantly pulled back from the other end of the tunnel by Xiao Mu, and he nearly crashed into the wall. He only steadied himself with the help of his 2 companions. Everyone looked over and saw that the corpses that were originally lying on the ground were creaking and slowly crawling up from the ground like machines. First, their limbs stiffened and twisted, and then their heads began to make cracking noises. Their hollow eyes looked at them without any light, and then they suddenly began to move. Li Yi expressionlessly summoned a long sword from her consciousness and held it in her hand, ready for battle. Stay Up Late exclaimed, "Oh my God!" His smile disappeared. The corpse has mutated. They were indeed turning into zombies, and they were turning into zombies very quickly. In the beginning, it was only turning its neck stiffly and swaying as it walked. When it rushed in front of them, its speed had increased by several times, and its arms and legs had become very sharp. It was actually a high-grade 2 corpse puppet. It's been a long time. Arbor looked coldly at the rapidly moving things in front of him. Without hesitation, he threw out an offensive purple talisman. With a bang, the talisman exploded on the leading corpse hag's body. However, the explosion did not cause it to bounce back an inch. Instead, it caused it to let out an even more unpleasant roar, as if it was enraged after being provoked, and it pounced at Xiao Mu with even greater speed. Swish! Xiao Mu shot an arrow into that guy's head by a hair's breadth. The black-gold arrow was like a streak of light, instantly hitting the corpse hag. A huge force exploded, sending it flying and crashing into the stone wall behind it. Chapter 39:23. Dirt and rocks tumbled down. Arbor's gaze was cold and mocking as she looked at the zombies in front of her. She shook her head. Too weak. After seeing a special-class zombie like Wei Mingli, he could kill these high-class zombies for fun if he encountered them now. Only a special-grade zombie like Wei Mingli could possibly be her match. The startled swan dagger, a top-tier spirit weapon, hadn't been able to pierce through Wei Mingli's skull in one hit. Only a zombie like that was worth playing with. Other than that, none of them were Lord Jojo's match. Arbor flicked out several defensive talismans and covered everyone's bodies. She raised her hand and said, "Kill their heads. Don't waste your energy on the other parts." Understood. The Purple Forest Guards leapt forward in high spirits and attacked bravely. Wherever their weapons went, they all aimed for the zombies' heads. These Purple Forest Guards were all experts above the 13th level of the spirit realm. Compared to the high-level zombies in front of them, they were only second-level zombies among the high-level ones. They were roughly equivalent to a 10th-level spirit realm cultivator. They were no match for the Purple Forest Guards at all. As long as everyone could protect themselves from being scratched, there wouldn't be much of a problem in battle. They took care of the mutated zombies in the tunnel in almost a matter of minutes. A serene blue flame ignited between Xiao Mu's fingers, incinerating those things into ashes without any room for protest. The group flew towards the tunnel in front of them, encountering many mutated zombies along the way. The further they went, the denser the dampness and cold air became. Chen Yi suddenly raised a hand to stop everyone's footsteps. He pointed at a thick stone door in front of them and said in a low voice, "Young miss, look." There were probably over 100 zombies surrounding the stone door. They were all roaring and clawing at the door, as if wanting to tear it apart. However, the stone door was covered in a layer of faint fluorescent light. It should be the power of a defensive glyph formation. These zombies wouldn't be able to break through the door in a short amount of time. Arbor snorted coldly. It looks like the Mu family is hiding in this rat hole. Roar, roar. The zombies suddenly discovered that there were people behind the tunnel. They turned their heads. It was impossible to distinguish friend from foe on their rotten faces. Arbor thought that there might be a lot of Mu clan's disciples among them. His cold eyes swept across these things, and he ordered indifferently, "Clean them all up." Dozens of Purple Forest Guards charged forward, and Ao Yi and Li Yi were naturally not far behind. Wherever the sword light passed, heads fell to the ground as if they were vegetables being chopped up. Arbor stood at the back of the group battle, his sharp eyes constantly sweeping across these undead hags. Whenever he saw something strange, he would immediately use his vines to drag it in front of him. Her pale fingers held a spirit tool sledgehammer, and without another word, she smashed the corpse puppet's head flat in a matter of minutes. Chen Yi, who was standing beside the little miss, couldn't help but use his sleeve to wipe the sweat on his forehead when he saw the little girl's battle prowess. The pitiful Mu family, if they had foresight, they definitely wouldn't have dared to provoke their little master. Who would dare to provoke such a young lady? Were they afraid of not dying fast enough? A quarter of an hour later, the zombies surrounding the stone door were all cleaned up and burned to ashes without hesitation. Arbor frowned and glanced at the wreckage on the ground. The heavenly luck fruit was really going to make a big move. Chapter 39:24. The number of these corpse puppets seemed to be increasing. Arbor indifferently glanced at the stone door. His fingers moved quickly, drawing a deciphering talisman in the air and flicking it at the stone door. Chen Yi watched in astonishment, and his heart couldn't help but tremble slightly. He inwardly mused, "No wonder the little crown princess looked disapproving when I mentioned the talisman array outside the ancestral hall yesterday." It turned out that the crown princess talisman technique was actually this exquisite. She was probably the only person in the world who could draw talismans in the air. The deciphering talisman shook on the stone door, instantly erasing the defensive talisman array on it. Arbor used the large spirit hammer in his hand to knock on the stone trough at the side, neither lightly nor heavily. The stone door instantly swung open with a crash. In an instant, There was quite a commotion inside the stone door. Countless dazzling spiritual forces aimed at the door, ready to erupt at any moment. Only to hear old Master Mu shout in a deep voice, "Everyone stop!" Everyone looked over in astonishment. Yet they saw the young crown prince consort standing there prettily with an aloof expression on her frosty little face. She swept a disdainful gaze at them just like that. "Jojo!" Matriarch Mu breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly patted her son and daughter's hands, repeatedly shouting, "What are you doing? Withdraw your spiritual forces, withdraw them." This stone room was quite big, and it was currently crammed full of people. Probably all the people from the Mu family's direct and collateral branches who had been transferred here were all here. In the tunnel, they had dealt with hundreds of corpse puppets that were either Tianyun or the Mu family. Currently, there were about 1,000 people in the stone room. They were probably all the people from the Mu family in the imperial capital. Crown Princess. Mu Qingya breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly walked forward to bow. "You're here to save us, right? Thank you for saving us." A middle-aged man in his 30s walked forward from behind Mu Qingya and also politely bowed to Arbor. Arbor found this person somewhat familiar. This man seemed to be Mu Jingfeng's follower, Mu Yang. Nodding, the little crown princess looks at Grandpa Mu expressionlessly. She finds that although Grandpa Mu looks tired, his clothes are clean. Then, Arbor looked at the Mu family members who were lying in the corner and said indifferently, "Let's talk outside." "You can't go out." A woman's shrill voice rang out. "There are monsters baring their fangs and brandishing their claws outside. You can't go out, you can't go out." Xiao Mu turned around and walked outside, not spouting a single word of nonsense. Chen Yi glanced at the little crown princess, then nodded and bowed to the old man. "Old Master Mu, please." Mu Tsang nodded and didn't say anything else. He supported his wife and followed her out of the stone room. The woman was still shrieking, "Are you crazy? Do you not want to live anymore? Don't you see how scary the monsters outside are?" Yuan Qiong'o, who was standing next to her, was also scared to death when she saw the old nanny's appearance. She tightly gripped her small handkerchief and was so nervous that her face turned pale. These days, her life had been particularly difficult, especially after the old master's meridians were crippled and half of his body was locked up. After he went crazy every day, she immediately leaned against him and no one in the first branch took her seriously. She wrung the handkerchief in her hand and bit her pale lips. Chapter 39:25. But seeing that the crowd was rushing out with the old man, she didn't dare to say anything and was just about to step out. Suddenly, the old woman's 5 fingers grabbed her like iron pliers. "Aunt, you can't go, you can't go." The old woman grabbed Yuan Qiong's hand like crazy and cried out in alarm, "There are so many monsters outside, any one of them can eat us. It's not as safe as here. Don't go out, all of you don't go out." Because of fear, the old woman reached out to grab the hands of the people around her. "After we go out, everyone has to be checked," Arbor said coldly. "See if there are any corpse puppets in the incubation period." The purple forest guards answered in unison. The expression on the old woman's face changed, and then she screamed louder. Don't go out, old woman, are you stupid? Do you want to live underground all the time?" Mu Dongni angrily pushed away the old woman's hand. "If you don't want to go out, then stay here alone," Mu Dongni said angrily. Anyway, she was going out. Previously, when Tianyun's people attacked the Mu family at night, they were caught off guard, so there were countless casualties. But the Mu family was not all useless people who couldn't resist, at least she, Mu Dongni, was not. Although Mu Dongni was extremely casual and didn't have much sense of family honor, she also knew that if the enemy came to kill her, she would only be waiting for death if she didn't resist. Yuan Qiong pulled her old woman's hand. "Old woman, don't worry too much. Since the crown princess and the others came in to save us, it means that the monsters outside should have been cleaned up." The old woman said sternly, "How is that possible? So many people in our Mu family were forced into this cave. How could they clean up so many monsters outside with just a few people?" What she said, everyone in the Mu family couldn't help but feel embarrassed. This didn't seem to be a compliment, right? Especially those elders from the Mu clan, who had previously been harshly reprimanded by Xiao Mu, felt a burning pain on their old faces at this moment. No wonder the young crown prince consort looked down on her family clan. As expected, they were as weak as a chicken. The little crown princess can clean up all the zombies outside with so many people. On the contrary, the thousands of Mu family's children only know how to hide in this pit and shrink their heads, not daring to go out. The crown princess' disdain for them was not without reason. The tall and thin elder Du's face was gloomy. After a while, he said, "The three elders are slightly injured. Let's go out first." The great elder, second elder, and third elder had put in a lot of effort in the process of transferring all the Mu family disciples. All the disciples of the Mu clan were grateful to them. Xiao Mu glanced back faintly at Elder Nadu, looking down on this mistress, Yuan Qiong, or even more. The shrewd women by this woman's side were like mad dogs. They didn't want to go out and even begged others to stay with them. It was a little ridiculous. Arbor glanced at the old woman and his gaze paused. He looked at the faint color on her face and glanced at her again. She suddenly stopped in her tracks, and the group of people following behind her naturally stopped as well. Old Master Mu looked at her in confusion and was about to ask what was wrong. However, he saw the little crown princess walk past them and enter the stone room, walking straight towards the old woman in the corner. Yuan Qiong, happened to be comforting the old woman. Chapter 39:26. As soon as she looked up, she saw the crown princess suddenly standing in front of her. Yuan Qiong, couldn't help but be slightly startled. No one dared to agree with the crown prince consort's ghost-like movements. Yuan Qiong, forced herself to be calm and tried to hold the old woman's arm. She asked in a trembling voice, "Grand Crown Princess, why are you doing this? You suddenly stood in front of me without saying a word. If you don't say a word, who can understand what you're thinking?" Arbor's gaze pierced through the old woman like a needle. He suddenly reached out, his fingers covered in the Vajra talisman as cold as jade. He grasped the old woman's arm. The old woman was so frightened that she couldn't help but tremble. Her entire body trembled as she shrieked, What are you doing?" With a rip, Arbor pulled away the old woman's clothes and coldly looked at the 3 very obvious lacerations on her arm. "You've been infected." Sir Jojo's voice sounded extremely cold. He stared at the old woman as if he was looking at a corpse. "No, no, no." The old woman trembled violently and couldn't help but tremble. She cried out in alarm, "Don't talk nonsense. I didn't do it at all." On the side, Mu Dongni also screamed. She quickly pulled open her sleeve and looked at her fair arm. Seeing that there were no scars on her arm, she sighed in relief. A trace of anger appeared on her plump, pretty face. "You old ghost, you actually have such bad intentions? No wonder you wanted to catch me just now. So you wanted to harm me?" "Oh no. Second miss, don't talk nonsense." The old woman cried out harshly, I didn't do anything." She looked pleadingly at Yuan Qiong. "Auntie, I'm not infected. Auntie, believe me." Yuan Qiong looked as if she had been scratched by a venomous snake. She withdrew her hand and took a few steps back. She cautiously looked at the old woman beside her and sized her up. When she saw that the old woman wanted to walk towards her, she quickly berated, "Don't come over, stop right there. You're not allowed to come over." Currently, the matter of the corpse puppets in the upper 3 provinces had already been publicized in the central plazas of the various cities. It was a terrifying existence that would gradually transform into a monster after being scratched. When was Nanny scratched? Could it have been last night? Last night, a few zombies came out from the cave nearby and killed 2 disciples of the Mu family. They even captured this old woman. In the end, although those monsters were killed and thrown out of the stone room, no one knew that the old woman had been scratched by the corpse hag. If she hadn't been found out, she would have been hiding in the crowd and could have exploded at any time, killing everyone around her. Thinking of this, Yuan Qiong couldn't help but shiver all over. "Damn it, I was almost killed by this stupid woman." Yuan Qiong glared angrily at the old woman and snapped, "Jiang Mama, how can you be so foolish?" Auntie, I didn't." "Auntie." The old woman cried out and reached out to grab Yuan Qiong's sleeve. However, Yuan Qiong waved her sleeve away as if she was avoiding a venomous snake. She even retreated more than 10 steps. When she was far away from the old woman, Yuan Qiong said coldly, "You're already like this, and you still want to harm me? Crown Princess, quickly get rid of this old woman. If she suddenly turns into a corpse, won't we all suffer?" Chapter 39:27. Concubine Mother. The old woman looked at Yuan Qiong in disbelief, covering her face and crying. It was impossible to say that she didn't care. Jiang Mama had followed Yuan Qiong for 7 or 8 years, and she had always been conscientious in her duties and considerate of her. But now, Yuan Qiong had abandoned her without hesitation. It was like a sharp knife stabbing into Jiang Mama's heart. Arbor glanced at them indifferently. It could be said that she had a deeper understanding of the human form than anyone else. She was not surprised by Yuan Qiong's behavior. In her previous life, when the zombie outbreak happened, she had seen many people who were more heartless than Yuan Qiong. "Tie her up first and bring her up," Arbor ordered faintly. Yuan Qiong, however, cried out in dissatisfaction, "How can we just tie her up like that? What's the use of tying her up? What if this old woman suddenly counterattacks and injures us? What should we do?" Mu Dongni glanced at her impatiently. "Why are you so talkative? She hasn't turned into a zombie yet. Besides, it's not like we won't deal with her after we tie her up and let people watch over her. Can't we go up first?" Everyone in the Mu family nodded in unison. Arbor didn't say anything more and led them back the way they came. Along the way, the expressions of the Mu family disciples changed unpredictably. From time to time, they would secretly glance at the little crown princess's cold face, not knowing what to think for a moment. If they said that the little crown princess was cold and heartless, she would have led people to dig a tunnel to save them. But if they said that she was very good to them, that wasn't necessarily the case. Her cold face and stiff expression along the way repeatedly showed how much she disliked the Mu family. After climbing out of the messy dry well, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Thus, Mu Tsong brought everyone to the front hall. Even if more than 1,000 people were standing in this large front hall, it wouldn't seem crowded. Mu Jingyuan faintly smiled, his tone somewhat mocking as he said, "It's all thanks to Jojo's arrival this time. Otherwise, with the elders' cautious temperaments, I'm afraid they would have to hide in that dark stone room for a few more days. At that time, the corpse poison in Mama Zhang's body might break out, and she might even scratch and injure many people." When Mu Tsong heard his third son's ridicule, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Reporting to the Crown Princess, Her Excellency Hao Fei has arrived with Alchemist Wang, Alchemist Go, and a dozen or so doctors, a Purple Forest guard hastily reported. Arbor nodded when he heard that. He glanced at more than 1,000 people in the hall and turned to the old man. "The people from the Heavenly Pill Association are here. Send them out in batches and get them checked one by one." "Don't think you can get away with it," Arbor said coldly. If he tried to deceive others after being poisoned by the corpse poison, who knew how many more people would be harmed when the poison erupted? Everyone's expressions trembled. Mu Jingxing couldn't help but angrily say, "Even we have to be checked?" Arbor's gaze gradually turned cold. He said to the Purple Forest guard, "Keep an eye on them. If anyone resists the check, just kill them. There's no need to report it." "Yes, Crown Princess." Everyone couldn't help but gasp. Crown Princess's words were truly cold, causing everyone's hearts to turn cold. After taking a deep breath, Mu Tsong nodded and waved his hand. "Do as the Crown Princess says." Mu Jingxing furiously sat down. His eyes were wide open as he glared at Arbor, his heart filled with resentment. That despicable brat. Chapter 39:28. Second Branch's 7th Miss, Mu Ro Xian, also sat down heavily under Madame Chio's tug. Most of the people had gone out for inspection, leaving only old Master Mu, Matriarch Mu, and several sons, daughters-in-law, and grandchildren present. Seeing that the little Crown Princess did not speak, Mu Tsong couldn't help but sigh. Jojo, the Mu family suffered this calamity and barely managed to preserve a bit of its foundation. I hope you will carefully consider Ancestor Zhaoyang's suggestion. Mu Jingxing slammed his cup on the floor and stood up hatefully with cupped hands. Father, I still have matters to attend to. Forgive me for leaving first. Jingxing. Old Master Mu Tsong's face instantly darkened. He knew what his second son was thinking, but who dared to obstruct Ancestor Zhaoyang's orders? Arbor glanced at the old man indifferently. It's enough for the Mu family to have you. If it really doesn't work, I think third uncle is pretty good. There won't be any problem in handing the Mu family to him. Mu Jingyuan was startled, then a smile blossomed on his face. It wasn't because he heard Jojo say that he would hand the Mu family to him, but because it was the first time he heard Jojo call him third uncle, so he was very happy. He even had a happy expression on his face. Mu Jingyuan stood up and laughed. Jojo, you called me third uncle. Old Master Mu's expression was extremely stifled. His granddaughter acknowledged third uncle, but did not acknowledge him as her grandfather. He had no place to put his old face. Mu Jingrui looked at his third brother with envy. He had interacted with the little fellow much longer than his third brother. He didn't expect that the first person the little girl acknowledged from the Mu family would be his third brother. However, this wasn't strange. After all, his third brother had stood unswervingly behind his eldest sister-in-law and the little girl. Seeing this, the old man sighed helplessly and nodded. It's not easy for you to accept the Mu family in such a short time. Let's discuss this matter later. But this time, we are very grateful that Jojo is willing to let bygones be bygones and come to find us. Mu Jingzhuang and the others also nodded. Only the people from the second branch sat there with wooden faces, as if someone owed him millions of spirit coins. When Madame Chiu saw the old man's gaze, she moved the corners of her lips in grievance and pulled out a very stiff smile. In fact, she didn't want to sit here and cause trouble, but her husband had left, so she had to stay here with her children and listen to what they were talking about. What if it affected the interests of the second branch? 3 days ago at night, Tian Yun's people suddenly came, as if they had barged in through an empty door. The old man said in a deep voice, "The leader is a strange man with a long neck, a sharp head, and a pair of big wings on his back." "Yes, it looks very much like an eagle." Mu Jingzhuang nodded. "That's a harpy modified by Tian Yun." Arbor said faintly, "We also encountered one in the Phoenix Forest. Also, I found a sun symbol on some of the black-robed men outside your stone room. It's probably the symbol of a branch of Tian Yun." The old man nodded solemnly. "It's not unreasonable for them to suddenly target our Mu family. As one of the 6 great patrician families, the Mu family also holds the secret of talisman arts." At this point, a trace of awkwardness appeared on the old man's face. Of course, the difference between their talisman arts and his little granddaughter's was like heaven and earth. But outsiders didn't know. Chapter 39-29. Outsiders only knew that they were a talisman aristocratic family with a 1,000-year legacy, so they must be an extremely powerful family. Outsiders had their eyes on the talisman techniques in their hands, wanting to snatch them away by force. Who would have thought that the little crown princess's talisman techniques were so extensive and profound that it was even more profound than their family's inheritance? Arbor looked up at the old man. The old man coughed dryly and said, "Even so, most of us still did pretty well when the crisis struck. We didn't lose face for the Mu family." Xiao Mu harumphed lightly, noncommittal. The old man was a little embarrassed as he weakly looked at his granddaughter and said, Of course, they still need to constantly train. But Jojo, regarding the issue of sky fate, our Mu family's standpoint is definitely the same as yours." "Yes." The Mu brothers nodded in succession. Mu Jingyuan smiled at his little niece and said, "Jojo, the Mu family has produced many people who have disappointed ancestor Zhaoyang all these years, but we still have many outstanding and ambitious youths. Take your 5th sister, Ro Qin, for example. Although she's frail and sickly, and her cultivation is shallow, she played an extremely good role in this sudden incident." Yes. Ro Qin's performance this time really gave me a huge shock. 4th brother, You really have a good daughter, Mu Jingxua praised. A faint smile appeared on Mu Jingxiao's stern face as he shook his head and said, Ro Qin is also a member of the family. This is what she should do. Everyone nodded. The Chiu family sat there as if they were an isolated family. Seeing the brothers happily praising each other, the Chiu family revealed slight anger on their faces. Mu Ruin could not help but snort angrily. In the end, if my second brother hadn't helped a few elders to push open the stone door in the passageway, we wouldn't even know what the situation would be like now. Madame Chiu smugly swept a glance at Mu Jingxiao and the rest. She did not say anything, but the smug look in her eyes was unmistakable. Mu Erkshu, who was mentioned by Mu Ruin, calmly raised his eyes and indifferently looked at the few elders of the Mu family. Mu Jingzhuang's expression was rather awkward. He laughed and said, Shui is naturally talented and capable. It's just that, he paused and suddenly said in a deep voice, on the day Tianyun broke in, it was the second branch who was in charge of guarding the entire Mu family. Madame Chiu couldn't help but be furious. Sixth brother, what is the meaning of this? Are you suspecting our second branch of the Heavenly Fate organization? Second sister-in-law, I didn't say that. I just find it a little strange. Mu Jingxua pursed his lips. Madame Chiu shouted angrily, You're just throwing a bucket of shit at my second branch. Of course, she absolutely could not admit to this matter. Otherwise, it would be a small matter if the entire second branch was expelled from the Mu family. If such a crime was put on her head, the entire second branch might be obliterated. Arbor looked suspiciously at the second branch's madam and coldly instructed Li Yi, who was beside him, Go and invite the second branch's old master out. Check his condition first. Madame Chiu could not help but be enraged. Crown Princess, what do you mean by this? Arbor stared at her furious gaze and coldly said, It means that I'm suspecting you. Chapter 39:30. Everyone choked in terms of infuriating people. No one would dare to rank ahead of the little crown princess even if she wanted to be ranked second. Arbor coldly glanced at Madame Chiu. If second uncle doesn't have a guilty conscience, why did he leave so quickly? Crown Princess, please be careful with your words. Mu Erkshu abruptly stood up and said with a cold expression, My father is loyal and devoted to the Mu family. You can't wrong him like this. It's the Crown Princess. Without another word, Li Yi stood up and walked out the door. A moment later, she led people to escort an enraged Mu Jingxing over. Arbor coldly swept a glance at him and directly opened his divine eye to look at his brain. His divine sense swept around, but he didn't find anything suspicious. Arbor retracted his gaze, his pensive gaze resting on Mu Jingxing's face. Mu Jingxing looked like he had suffered extraordinary shame and humiliation. He kept kicking his legs and hooting, Crown Princess, you're going too far. You're going too far. The little Crown Princess looked at him coldly and said, You're the one who made people suspicious. Mu Jingxing was furious. How did I make people suspicious? If you don't have a problem, why did you leave the hall in an excuse? Arbor coldly glanced at him, annoyed that he was finding trouble for himself. Since he didn't have a problem, why did he throw a tantrum and return to his room? She even had to spend some effort to invite him over again. In the end, when she looked at his head, she didn't find any black crystals. Crown Princess. Mu Jingxing was furious. If his eyes could devour people, the little Crown Princess would probably be completely torn to shreds by now. Arbor leisurely waved his hand at him. Someone naturally escorted the trembling Mu Jingxing back a few steps and firmly pressed him to sit on a stool. Madame Chiu looked angrily at Arbor. Mu Erkshu also couldn't take it anymore and stood up. Crown Princess, isn't it too rude of you to do this? Arbor glanced at him indifferently and gestured for him to sit down. Then, he said in a cold voice, I just used my divine sense to scan all of you. Fortunately, none of you have anything left behind by Tianyun in your heads. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. They knew very well that if they really had that thing in their heads, they would have been wiped out long ago. Since Tianyun was able to barge into the Mu clan as if there was no one around, it means that there is something fishy going on inside. The old man's body trembled slightly. Even if we can't find anything in their brains, it doesn't mean that there isn't a ghost among us, Arbor said coldly. He suddenly looked up and asked, "Where's Mu Jingfeng?" Everyone was speechless. Only now did the child realize that her father, Mu Jingfeng, was not in the hall. The old man's expression became a bit awkward for a moment. Jingfeng, before the incident, had already disappeared. Qingya was the one who reported this matter. Mu Qingya hastily stood up and bowed with her head lowered. That day, I served Lord with his medicine and watched him fall asleep. Who knew that the court would suddenly catch fire in the middle of the night? When I finished putting out the fire and went to Lord's room, I didn't see him again. Arbor made an "oh" sound. His gaze roved over her body, and he probed her mind with his divine sense. Mu Qingya's body trembled slightly, and she suddenly fell backward. If not for Nanny Chio's quick reflexes, she would have fallen to the ground. Chapter 39-31. Arbor had only used a bit of her divine perception to check on her, so it wouldn't hurt her at all. She couldn't help but feel a little sick seeing her in such a delicate state. An ordinary person like Mu Qingya didn't have a conscience, so it was impossible for her to see anything even if she went in. Arbor inwardly chided herself for being slow-witted and retracted her divine perception. She glanced at her indifferently and said, "Madam, you still have to take care of your body." "Thank you, Crown Princess, for your concern." Mu Qingya curtsied, her expression gentle yet bitter. Arbor retracted her gaze and said to the old man, "It's getting late. I think the Mu family still needs to be properly settled." She asked indifferently, "How's it going outside?" A purple forest guard immediately came to report. "Crown Princess, there are more people. The doctors outside still haven't finished seeing half of them. Then stay and take your time. Send them back after you're done." Arbor stood up and walked out. This crown princess will return to the palace first. The crown prince and eldest son should be back by now. She still had to rush back to have lunch with her husband. "Farewell, crown princess." Everyone in the Mu family stood up to send her off. The little crown princess ran out, her footsteps flying the entire way. Li Yi followed behind her and asked, "Does the crown princess have someone suspicious in mind?" "Other than third uncle and the old man, everyone is suspicious." Arbor pursed her lips. Yi, as expected, the little crown princess really didn't like the Mu family. "We received news that the Mu family's eldest young master should be returning to the capital tomorrow. Oh, let's have eldest brother investigate when the time comes." Arbor frowned and said, "My intuition tells me that there's something wrong with that second branch." Although she didn't find the black crystal buried by Tian Yun in Mu Jingxing's family's heads, perhaps Mu Jingxing didn't need to modify it. Or perhaps Mu Jingxing's family didn't have the heart to modify it. She didn't know. Or perhaps it was that missing Mu Jingfeng's doing. Who knew? It was better to leave the Mu family's matter to their own family. She had already done all she could. The little crown princess snorted and quickly jumped into the carriage. "Let's go back." In the other room. At this moment, Mu Jingfeng's body was half paralyzed as he struggled to crawl to the metal door. He slammed the metal door with all his might and bellowed, "Let me out. Hurry and let me out. I've told you everything you want to know. What else do you want? Mu Qingya, are you Mu Qingya? Is it you? Bitch, bitch, bitch." He roared angrily, but the iron door opened unexpectedly. A long leg stepped in, stepped on his face, and walked in while giggling. Mu Jingfeng nearly fainted from anger, his entire body trembling with hatred. Tis. How can the dignified patriarch of the Mu clan be like this? The teasing laughter reached Mu Jingfeng's ears, causing him to be on the verge of exploding in rage. He angrily smashed his left fist on the ground. Because of the blockage of his meridians, half of his body could not move, and his other hand was also in a crippled state. Ha! The woman twisted her body as she walked forward, and her fair and tender feet stepped on Mu Jingfeng's chest. Mu Jingfeng's gaze followed the red satin ribbon tied around her chest and saw a fair and exquisite face with exquisite makeup. "Aya, my pitiful patriarch Mu." "Oh, that's not right. It should be the previous patriarch." That woman stepped hard on his body. Chapter 39-32. Squatting down, the woman's eyes moved closer as she smiled faintly. Do you know? That map you gave me is completely useless. The woman sneered as she threw a piece of paper at his face. She nonchalantly said, Master is very angry right now. She raised her hand to grab the front of his shirt and pulled him up to face her. Her upturned eyelashes fluttered like a butterfly's wings as her lips curled into a mocking smile. Tell me, how should I make you die so that you'll feel comfortable? Mu Jingfeng's eyes burned with fury. That's because you're useless. Slap. The woman raised her hand and gave him a slap. Suddenly, as if she was suffering from schizophrenia, she pulled him into her arms and gently stroked his pale face. She muttered to herself, Mu family head, if you don't cooperate with us, no one will be able to save you when the time comes. Mu Jingfeng's entire body trembled involuntarily. Always been very cooperative with you. You wanted the Mu family's map, I gave it to you. You wanted a suitable candidate in the Mu family, I also gave it to you. Isn't that right? Hee. The woman laughed sharply. Suddenly, a layer of hedgehog-like needles covered her originally fair skin and pierced into Mu Jingfeng's chest. Mu Jingfeng let out a tragic howl as his entire body uncontrollably curled up from the pain. Was it Mu Qingya who betrayed me to you? Is it? Is it her? If not for Mu Qingya's guidance, who would be able to take him away from that abandoned woodshed in the Mu family's main branch? It must be Mu Qingya who did it. It's her. This bitch has always wanted to harm me. She wants to kill me. Yo, you're angry. The hedgehog woman retracted her spikes and smiled as she shook her body. Your wife has always hated you. How pitiful. The woman raised her hand to pat his face. When I told her that there was a deal to be made, she agreed and sold you out without any mercy. It's really vexing for a man to act like you. Mu Jingfeng screamed in shock. He kept banging his head against the ground, the wall, and even the hedgehog girl. Hedgehog lady pushed him to the ground with a finger in disdain. She then stood up and walked away. Poor man, you can continue to howl here. When you can think of an idea to deal with the Mu family, I will let you go. What do you think? Or you can give me your clan's secret treasures, talismans, and legacies. In exchange for freedom. Mu Jingfeng slammed into this and that as if he had gone mad, his entire body contorted in an abnormal manner. The woman glanced at him in disdain, snorted, closed the iron door again and walked out. Greetings, Vice Hall Master Meng. As soon as the woman walked out of the door and saw the tall black shadow under the corridor, her eyes couldn't help but light up. She hurriedly leaned over seductively. Vice Hall Master Meng's half-masked face revealed a trace of disdain. He pushed her away in displeasure and said in a cold voice, Thorny Rose, do you have any useful information? The hedgehog girl called Thorny Rose shook her head and twisted her soft body. Chapter 39-33. The woman coquettishly said, I think that Mu Jingfeng is a useless person. He can't even suppress a madam without any cultivation and was even sold to us by that woman. That's right, that mortal girl called Mu Qingya seems to have interacted with people from our hall. Should we send someone to erase her? Vice Hall Master Meng faintly shook his head. No need. The life or death of a woman without any cultivation isn't that important. All right, I'll listen to you. Thorny Rose cast a coquettish glance at Vice Hall Master Meng and coquettishly said, Oh right, has Hall Master Gong's injury improved recently? Vice Hall Master Meng swept a glance at this coquettish woman and faintly knitted his brows before turning to leave with a cold expression. Just do your own thing well. Don't inquire too much about Hall Master matters. Also, don't fish for too long, lest you catch the big fish to death. All right. I'll listen to you. Thorny Rose swayed her body and put on a gentle and coquettish appearance, which disgusted Vice Hall Master Meng greatly. He faintly glanced at her before leaving expressionlessly. Thorny Rose harumphed and lowered her head to sweep a glance. She had a perfect figure and a perfect face. Which of the men in the hall didn't prostrate themselves under her skirt? Yet there were always a few thorns that refused to submit to her. It was truly troublesome. After thinking about it, she still decided to listen to Vice Hall Master Meng and obediently opened the metal door to enter. She discovered that Mu Jingfeng was still lying on the ground and howling nonstop, looking like he had suffered a huge blow. Thorny Rose stepped forward and kicked him. She indifferently said, "Stop pretending to be dead, all right? Kill me. Kill me if you have the guts." Mu Jingfeng sternly shouted. He was currently half dead. How could he have the energy to continue living? On the contrary, death was a form of relief. Kill you? How can that do? Thorny Rose softly chuckled and used her toes to rub Mu Jingfeng's cheeks. Hey, I say, don't be so weak. You're a grown man. Don't talk about death every time you open your mouth. How about this? Thorny Rose smiled and took out a small bottle of green liquid from her inner world. I have an improved medicinal liquid here. You can take it a few times. Not only can it immediately relieve the pain in your body, it can also I'll make you stronger so that you won't be paralyzed like this anymore. Mu Jingfeng reluctantly turned to look at her with a suspicious expression. How could this woman be so kind? She must be lying to him. He had been captured and brought here for several days. Every time this woman came, she would either humiliate him or trample on him. How could she possibly give him some recovery liquid? But looking at the bottle of medicinal liquid in her hand, for some reason, Mu Jingfeng's heart burned with passion. It was as if the medicinal liquid was a treasure that could sustain him for the rest of his life and allow him to continue on his path of glory. He drooled as he looked at the potion in Thorny Rose's hand. He crawled over and crawled to Thorny Rose's feet. With a pious expression, he extended his hands towards her. Thorny Rose giggled and waved her right hand. Her bewitching voice faintly said, "This black crystal will be your proof of identity from now on. Don't worry. The organization won't mistreat any youngster who dares to work hard." "Oh, you're not young anymore." Thorny Rose giggled. Chapter 39-34. She then reached out to cover her mouth and coquettishly swayed her body as she softly chuckled. "But don't worry, family head Mu. You still have a bright future ahead of you. I have high hopes for you." As she spoke, she flung the small bottle filled with the green medicinal liquid to the ground. Mu Jingfeng crawled over like a mangy dog. He hurriedly reached out a hand and firmly grasped the bottle that had fallen. His gaze was filled with hope as it landed on the bottle. There was a voice in his heart that kept telling him, "Eat it, eat it, eat it, and you'll be able to regain your past strength. Eat it, and you'll be able to take revenge and complain. You'll be able to deal with those who owed you and stepped on you in the past." He shakily reached out to uncork the bottle and drank it in one gulp. He wanted to return to the pinnacle of his life. Sir Jojo returned to the Eastern Palace at noon and leaned against the window to wait for Emolien's return. If she had nothing to do after lunch, she could make a trip home to take a look. However, it hadn't even been half a month since she went to Phoenix Forest for training, so there shouldn't be any major issues at home. Sir Jojo rolled around on the soft couch and looked up to see the Crown Prince entering with furrowed brows. The little fellow immediately jumped up from the brocade couch and ran to her husband's side, reaching out to hug him. Emolien was startled and instinctively reached out to catch her body. A smile surfaced on his expressionless face, and he lowered his head to kiss her little face. "Why are you back so early? I thought you'd have to deal with the Mu family's matter until evening." "It's a piece of cake for me," the little fellow boasted as she raised her head. "But why do you look so worried? Your father gave you a difficult problem again." Emolien smiled and glanced at her. He shook his head and pulled her to sit down on the couch. "I received news that a large number of zombies have appeared on the outskirts of Lee City, and they've taken over a village in the outskirts. Are you going?" Arbor blinked and looked at the man in front of her with watery eyes. "Not for the time being. The situation should be under control. Third Fu and the rest have already returned from Huiping Village. Let him handle this matter. You said before that you subdued an apothecary in Greyfield Village." The little fellow leaned into his embrace and said with great interest, "It's that pair of corpse puppets and the apothecary siblings." Emolien nodded. "I've arranged for the siblings to go to Beiwang Valley for Mr. Su's research." Arbor blinked. "Today, I brought back an old woman who was scratched from the Mu family. I took the initiative to find a senior pharmacist in the city to treat her. Sure enough, it has the effect you mentioned. Yes. Arbor furrowed his brows and pondered for a moment before saying, "It seems that the medicinal power of a high-level alchemist can really suppress the corpse poison. But only for a few days. But this is also a major discovery." Arbor rubbed his face. "Lotus, are you worried about the village outside Lee City? Do you think that there will be a large-scale outbreak of zombies everywhere?" Mo Lien didn't hide it from her and said with a nod, "It's extremely likely. I reckon that there will also be an outbreak in Song Province and Ming Province. But I haven't received Duan Yu's message these past 2 days." "Oh." The little fellow frowned, somewhat dissatisfied. "He's really unreliable. He said that he would send us a message after returning to Song Province." Mo Lien couldn't help but chuckle and nuzzle her little head. "He'll probably have a lot of troublesome matters once he returns." Chapter 39-35. Their family isn't easy to get along with either. They'll probably cause trouble for him the moment they get back. They might even be ambushed along the way. Arbor looked conflicted. "Really? Don't worry, I'll send someone to ask around. There should be news back in 2 or 3 days." Song Province was very far from the Divine Continent. It would be considered good if news could be sent back in 2 or 3 days. Arbor nodded her little head. "Let's eat." "Okay." Mo Lien pulled her up and ordered someone to serve the meal. Just as the meal was placed on the table and the two sat down hand in hand, a eunuch rushed in to report. "Your Highness, the state preceptor requests an audience." The little girl's face darkened. "Why is the state preceptor so annoying? Does he have to come and disturb us even when we're having lunch?" Mo Lien smiled at her. "I'll go and meet him." However, Xiao Mu was unconcerned. "You eat first." Mo Lien patted her head and got up to meet the guest. The little girl ate alone without any taste. She poked around with her chopsticks for a while before putting down her chopsticks and standing up. "The Crown Princess, where did your Highness go to meet the state preceptor?" "In the study on the east side." The little girl thought for a while and took 2 fruits. She ran out with small steps and strolled towards the study on the east side. Before she ran to the door of the study, Sir Jojo hid behind a pillar and secretly looked at the 2 people coming out of the study. Xiao Qiao's Lian Ku was really handsome. Even when she was walking beside the imperial tutor, who looked like a charlatan and had a celestial air about him, she did not pale in comparison. In fact, she was even a head above him. Xiao Mu was elated on the inside. When she saw the 2 people walking over, she switched from behind one pillar to another and inexplicably cast an invisibility talisman and an aura-concealing talisman on herself. In Jojo's lotus eyes, there should be nowhere to hide. Mo Lien and the state preceptor walked through the corridor. His handsome eyes seemed to glance behind the pillar, and a smile flashed across the corner of his mouth. Jojo shrunk his head and hid behind the pillar like an ostrich. He muttered, "You can't see me." After seeing them walk past, she tilted her head and stuck it out, continuing to follow them. He followed them at a distance that was neither too far nor too close, and he could hear their conversation clearly. "His Majesty has appointed me as the Goodwill Ambassador to the Sea of Forgetfulness. For this matter, I will need the help of the Crown Princess. If possible, Your Highness, please allow the Crown Princess to follow along. Nowadays, the world is difficult and dangerous, and the common people live in hardship. His Majesty intends to unite all the forces that can be united in these 3 provinces to fight against the heavenly fate. As his subjects, we naturally have to obey him 1,000 times over." What he meant was that as the Crown Prince, he should also contribute his own wife to share His Majesty's worries. Mo Lien said faintly, "With the state preceptor going to the Sea of Forgetfulness, His Majesty and I are very assured. The Crown Princess has an extremely important matter to attend to these few days. The state preceptor's trip to the Sea of Forgetfulness cannot be delayed. It is better not to delay." "Oh." The imperial preceptor turned his head, his gaze seeming to glance below the pillar. The Sea of Forgetfulness has always been connected to the Crown Princess. If she were to travel, this subject believes that this matter will definitely be twice the result with half the effort. I'm going to lie down. See you tomorrow. Chapter 39-36. Mo Lien smiled and turned to look at the calm and collected Grand Tutor. The Crown Princess needs to recuperate for a period of time. After all, we have to make the soul-returning pill for His Majesty in a few days. This matter is urgent. As for the Sea of Forgetfulness, there will be plenty of opportunities to go there in the future. The Crown Princess must not have gone to the Sea of Forgetfulness under Imperial Father's orders. It seems that the Grand Tutor himself wants to ask the Crown Princess for help. The Grand Tutor lowered his eyes and said softly, "If that's the case, all right then." This official came abruptly. "Please forgive me, Your Highness. The Grand Tutor is also worried about the country. I naturally will not blame you, nor will I say anything in front of Imperial Father." Prince Mo smiled meaningfully at him, then politely asked someone to lead the Grand Tutor out of the Eastern Palace. Turning to look at an empty corridor pillar, Prince Mo smiled helplessly. Bad things still not coming out? Like a butterfly flying through flowers, the little girl suddenly darted out from the side of the pillar in the corridor and ran quickly to the Crown Prince's side. With a face full of curiosity, she asked, "That old fox came to invite me to the Sea of Forgetfulness? Could it be that he did not give him a good enough beating at the banquet last time, and now he dared to jump out and cause trouble again?" Mo Lien nodded. "Indeed. Haha, he really knows how to flatter himself." Arbor pursed his lips in mockery. Why would this old swindler think that she, the Crown Princess, would accompany him to the Sea of Forgetfulness? If she wanted to go, she could just drag Lotus along. With him? Dream on. Mo Lien raised his hand to comb her hair and smiled faintly. "Ignore him. I've already sent him away. Whether Jojo goes to the Great Forest of the North, the Phoenix Forest, the Red River Gorge, or the Sea of Forgetfulness, I will accompany you." Lord Xiao Xiao rubbed against his body and raised her small head. Her watery eyes curved into two shallow arcs. "I'll keep my word." "Of course." Mo Lien smiled and lifted her up. She leaned over and whispered, "When have I ever lied to my Xiao?" Xiao Xiao nodded her head in satisfaction and reached out her hand to wrap around his neck. Her furry little head rubbed against his neck back and forth as she happily said, "Xiao Xiao's Lotus." Mo Lien smiled and lowered her head to look at him. She carried him all the way to the side hall. "Did you eat just now?" "I didn't eat much." "Why are you not eating?" "I'm not in the mood." "He must be feeling uneasy because he can't see me." "Shameless." "Then I'll eat with you." It was a gentle afternoon with a gentle breeze. It was the beginning of July and the sun was shining brightly. It was truly a sunny day. In the evening, it started to drizzle outside. The eldest young master, who was dressed in a black robe, gently pushed open the door and saw his younger brother sitting by the window. The sun was already setting in the west. The fifth young master supported his chin with one hand as he leaned against the window frame. The book in his hand was slightly drooping, and his gaze was fixed on the fine raindrops in the lotus pond. He clearly didn't read a single word. Qin Xian lowered his eyes and glanced at the book in his hand. Drunken Bliss? It seemed to be a novel that was recently released on the market. He didn't expect that his fifth brother, who was always as calm as still water, would actually read such a strange book instead of reading zither books or teacher's treatise. Cough. Eldest young Sir Qin deliberately coughed, which allowed the 5 young masters, who had been in a daze, to return to their senses. Chapter 39-37. He hastily put down the book and stood up to welcome him. "Elder brother." Eldest young Sir Qin glanced at him and pointed at the stool at the side. "Sit." "Fifth brother, I've already reported seventh brother's actions to father. He will receive the punishment he deserves." Fifth young Sir Qin nodded indifferently, as if he wasn't the slightest bit interested in whether seventh Qin received punishment or what kind of punishment he received. Eldest young Sir Qin glanced at his younger brother's expression and said with a sigh, "Old seventh truly went overboard this time. Don't worry, eldest brother will definitely give you justice." Fifth young Sir Qin shook his head indifferently. It's all thanks to the stoic face that you were able to recover so quickly this time. At the mention of the little stoic, the eldest young Sir couldn't help but sigh in frustration, and a peculiar emotion entered his eyes. The fifth young Sir's eyes brightened slightly, and his gaze subconsciously shifted to the thin blanket on the bed. Speaking of which, the stoic face's pill arts are unparalleled in the world. Eldest young Sir Qin sighed with emotion. Fifth young Sir Qin lowered his eyes slightly and silently listened to eldest young Sir Qin. After a long time, he finally lifted his head slightly and fixed his gaze on his eldest brother. Eldest brother, how can I become stronger? Qin Xian was startled, and his gaze landed on his fifth brother. He looked him up and down. Why do you ask? No, I was just asking out of turn. Fifth young Sir Qin was like a child who had done something wrong, and he hastily lowered his head. Eldest young Sir Qin smiled helplessly and lightly patted his younger brother's hand. Xiao, don't mind these things too much. There are also many ordinary people in the divine province. Moreover, you aren't ordinary. With your intelligence and knowledge, you can also stand at the pinnacle of this world. However, he didn't want to always be protected by others. He also wanted to become strong enough to protect others. The eldest young Sir stood up and walked to the window, slowly closing it. It's windy outside, so it should be a bit chilly tonight. Will it be cold with a thin blanket like yours? The fifth young Sir stroked that furry blanket and shook his head indifferently, murmuring softly, "It's very warm." Qin Xian turned around and looked at him with a slightly surprised gaze. Songzhou Imperial Resting Palace. It was already late at night. The great emperor closed the booklet in his hand and asked coldly, "Is he still here?" The head eunuch who accompanied them knelt on the ground, trembling. He nodded and said, "The fourth prince has been in the Lonely Mountain Imperial Mausoleum for a day and a night. The rain doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. Let him be." Emperor Tsong angrily threw a scroll to the ground. It's hard to achieve great things when you're in the throes of love. When the child was 8 years old, he showed great talent. The Tsong Emperor's face was filled with anger as he recalled. He had originally thought that if he was given proper training in the outside world, he would definitely become a dragon. Who would have thought that he would become worse and worse? The head eunuch could only lower his head and advise in a low voice, "Your Highness is still young, and you've just experienced Her Highness's funeral. It's normal for you to take things too hard." The Tsong Emperor snorted coldly. "How can you handle major matters if you're indecisive?" Cough, cough, cough. "Your Majesty." The head eunuch hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Please take care of your body." Emperor Tsong waved his hand at him. His cold face was covered with faint anger. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." A eunuch outside hastily reported, "Marquis Anxing has slipped through the night and requested an audience with Your Majesty." Chapter 39-38. The Songzhou Emperor pinched the space between his eyebrows with a grumpy expression. He was still worried about his son's matter. Now that Xingho came, he didn't know what he was up to. Did he think he had so much time to deal with their trivial matters? He wanted to ask the eunuch to send him away, but Xingho came in on his knees crying. When he saw the Songzhou Emperor, he burst into tears. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty! Please help me, Your Majesty! My Xiangchang is gone." Sob, 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 sob. The Songzhou Emperor's glaring eyes suddenly narrowed. He pinched his eyebrows and pressed his aching head. "Didn't Xiangchang go to Phoenix Forest with the Imperial Academy? What happened?" "Your Majesty, Your Majesty! Someone set up an ambush on the way back from Xiangchang and chased her for 1,000 miles. And Xingho cried. "Your Majesty, you didn't see Xiangchang's appearance when she came back. There was almost no good flesh on her body. Woo woo woo, Your Majesty, please uphold justice for us father and daughter. The murderer must be severely punished." The Songzhou Emperor asked patiently, "Then do you know who the murderer is?" I know." And Xingho glared and said angrily, "The secret guards who chased her along the way are all from the Divine Prefecture. Although I didn't find any flaws in them, it must be the crown princess of the divine prefecture who has a grudge against Xiang Chong and such a powerful force. And Xingho was sobbing, with snot and tears running down his face. I have confirmed this. That's what Xiang Chong said before she died. Your Majesty, please help me, Your Majesty. The Zhongzhou Emperor's head was about to explode, but now he was even more annoyed by his crying. He scolded angrily, Then what do you want me to do? Punish the crown princess of the divine prefecture. The Zhongzhou Emperor couldn't help but laugh. The crown princess of the divine prefecture is in the imperial capital of the divine prefecture. My hands can't reach that far. Your Majesty, if Your Majesty doesn't want to help me, I have no one to complain to, sob. And Xingho cried so hard that he was almost rolling on the ground. Grand Eunuch Lai Fu hurriedly ran forward a few steps and advised in a low voice, Marquis, please don't continue to be unreasonable. His Majesty had a hard time dealing with court affairs for a day. Our fourth prince is still making a ruckus in the lonely mountain imperial mausoleum. Can you take a rest first? An Xingho burst into tears and said, Your Majesty, how is this old subject being unreasonable? If Your Majesty refuses to uphold justice for us, then who else in this world can uphold justice for us? Woo. The veins on the Tsang Prefecture Emperor's forehead bulged. Your Majesty, the Eastern Mountain King requests an audience. Head Eunuch Lai Fu and the few junior eunuchs behind him looked at each other in dismay. What's going on today? Did he purposely choose the moment when the great emperor was in a bad mood to get scolded? East Mountain Wang De strode in and turned a blind eye to An Xingho, who was crying and making a scene on the ground. East Mountain King Wu Heng's style was simple. He directly cupped his fist and bowed to the emperor, then said, I've received news that a large number of corpse puppets broke out in Little Li Town in the southern Eagle City this evening. The entire Little Li Town, from the top to the bottom, had lost their lives in this calamity. The great emperor's pupils shrank, and he suddenly turned to look at East Mountain King Wu Heng with a sharp gaze. What do you think? We need Your Majesty's warrant to mobilize the city defense forces in the nearby Eagle City to eliminate those corpse puppets. Chapter 3939. Wu Heng, heed my orders. Zhongzhou's emperor promptly ordered and tossed him a warrant. The East Mountain Duke prostrated and left after receiving the order. Before he left, he didn't even glance at An Xingho, who was still lying on the ground and wiping his tears. His Majesty wearily sat down on the dragon throne. An Xingho returned first. We'll talk about this later. An Xingho opened his mouth and wanted to argue, but he was lifted up and dragged out by several junior eunuchs. An Xingho was naturally indignant and kept shouting, Your Majesty, along the way, but he was mercilessly thrown out by the junior eunuchs. 2 days later, Duan Yu woke up in a bamboo house with simple furnishings. He pressed his heavy head and slowly climbed up from the bamboo bed with a twitch of his brows. Yuan Zhen walked in with a plate of hot porridge. When he saw that Duan Yu had woken up, he immediately beamed and said, Your Highness, you're awake. Duan Yu sat there silently and turned a deaf ear to Yuan Zhen's words. Xiao Kezi quickly walked up and took the bowl of porridge. He gently placed it on the side table and cautiously asked, Your Highness, you haven't eaten all the rice grains after 3 days and nights. How about eating a bite first? What's wrong with me? Duan Yu frowned as soon as he spoke. He felt like his voice was crushed by a heavy object and was extremely hoarse. Yuan Zhen quietly said, Your Highness is in deep grief and was drenched in the rain for 3 days. Last night you fainted. Xiao Kezi's voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. How about, Your Highness, eat a bit first? Duan Yu's expression was calm and indifferent, as if a thin mask was hanging on his face. He suppressed all his emotions deep down in his heart. Give it to me, he said dryly. Xiao Kezi was instantly overjoyed and quickly picked up the warm bowl of porridge, bowing as he handed it over. Duan Yu expressionlessly downed the warm porridge in one mouthful without using a spoon. Greetings to Your Majesty. A junior eunuch's anxious and bewildered voice came from outside. Zhongzhou's emperor, Rong Yuan, walked in with a sullen face and stared at his son. He then sighed deeply and ordered, "All of you leave." After everyone left, only the father and son were left in the small bamboo house. "I have always had high hopes for you," Rongyuan said coldly. "However, you have really disappointed me this time. If I were you, I definitely wouldn't waste my limited time on mourning and crying. So you're not me." The great emperor was inexplicably choked by his son. He wanted to get angry, but he still snorted coldly. "Do you know what your biggest weakness is? Soft-hearted." Rongyuan spat out these two words heartlessly. "If you were strong enough from the start, your mother wouldn't have encountered such a thing." Duan Yu abruptly raised his head and stared sharply at the man before him. He sneered, "Isn't it because you're incompetent?" "What did you say?" "My mother was originally living well on Sikong planet. If you hadn't come to provoke her for the rest of her life, she could have continued to live happily like this for the rest of her life." "Because you're my son," Rongyuan said plainly. "You're the most outstanding one among all my sons. No one can deny that." "So?" Duan Yu couldn't resist chuckling. "My mother is only a vessel to give birth to your children?" "Yes." Rongyuan nodded cruelly. The evening continued, around 8 p.m. Chapter 3940. Duan Yu's eyes twisted slightly. The morning light's warmth seeped in through the window and landed on him, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of warmth. "If you don't love her, why did you take her in?" "Because of you." Rongyuan coldly said, "As a monarch, the most important thing is to have an heir. Having a good son is just as important as having a vast territory." "So," he sneered, "you cast a wide net and focused on catching fish?" Rongyuan nonchalantly nodded. "Naturally, you will also be like this in the future." "I won't." Rongyuan was taken aback, seeming to find his decisiveness a bit strange. "But since you don't love her, why delay other people?" Rongyuan was a bit angry and turned to glare at his son. He coldly said, "Then work harder and marry the one you love." Duan Yu didn't speak for a long time, until the Zhangzhou emperor felt a bit annoyed. He pushed the crease between his brows and coldly asked, "What else do you want to ask?" Duan Yu coldly questioned, his eyes filled with viciousness. "Just because she's an insignificant woman? That you can order her around? That's why you don't care about her life or death at all?" Although it's a bit cruel to say this, it's really very difficult for a normal person to survive in this man-eating world without their own self-defense skills, Rongyuan dryly said as if he was talking about something insignificant. Duan Yu scoffed, and his body abruptly fell back, sitting heavily on that bamboo couch. He coldly looked at him and enunciated each word clearly. "He will, that will." Rongyuan raised his brows, seeming to be interested. He nodded at his son and said, "As long as you have the ability, father will be happy to see it happen." "You're really magnanimous." Duan Yu scoffed. As he watched Rongyuan's figure walk out, he suddenly asked, "Have you never loved anyone in your life?" Rongyuan's footsteps paused before he replied, "I have. But if you're not strong enough, it's useless to have loved." Rongyuan looked into the distance indifferently as if he was looking at someone. He said coldly, "It won't belong to you. I'll give you a month at most." He walked out of the bamboo building and left these last words. Duan Yu was silent for a long time. After a long while, Zi finally walked in, trembling with fear. "Have you found him?" Xiao Zi hurriedly nodded. "Dr. Tu is already waiting outside. It's just that, Your Highness, the palace has already investigated the imperial consort's matter. They said yes, there were no signs of poisoning. She must have been scared by the white bear a few days ago." "Do you believe this kind of nonsense?" Duan Yu asked coldly. Little Xi lowered his head and did not dare to say another word. Duan Yu stood up and walked outside without a word. Outside the bamboo house, a woman was dressed in green. Her makeup was clean and simple. He was in his early 20s and had fair skin. When this woman saw Duan Yu coming out, she stepped forward and curtsied without looking sideways. "You've examined her?" The woman nodded and then pursed her lips. "This subordinate skills are lacking. Although this subordinate saw some signs, I can't be certain. The Imperial Consort's body doesn't seem to be poisoned, but the Imperial Consort's body is healthy. She shouldn't have died from a scare. Chapter 3941. Duan Yu stared at her. There doesn't seem to be any poison in your body? The woman nodded. This subordinate suspects that the poison used by that person is colorless and odorless. It's even possible that it works by entering the blood. Have you done what I told you to do? Physician 2 nodded and handed an item wrapped in a square handkerchief to Duan Yu. Duan Yu frowned and nodded after glancing at it. A figure soundlessly appeared behind Duan Yu. Send it to the Heavenly Pill Hall. Yes. The black figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. Duan Yu turned around, and his gaze landed in the distance. It was chilly and cold without a trace of warmth. Xiao Kezi stood there solemnly with his hands by his side, not daring to speak for a long time. He only vaguely felt as if a thin layer of mist had enveloped His Highness the Fourth Prince. It was so cold that it seeped into his bones. He gazed at the mountains in the distance that were all beneath his feet. After a very, very long time, Duan Yu finally took a step forward. It was merely a small step, but it seemed to have exhausted all the strength in his body his mother had left, and he would no longer have a mother for the rest of his life. In the past, he didn't think much of it when she kept nagging by his ear. But humans were strange like this. Once something was lost, it would be impossible to get it back. Sometimes, it would be too late for regrets. He looked up. These few days, he only wanted to immerse himself in his own world. He didn't want to hear, see, or think about anything. He was currently standing at the edge of a cliff, gazing at the drifting clouds in the sky. It was as if he could see his mother's gentle and smiling face. Son, say, when will you be willing to fulfill Mom's wish and marry a wife for Mom to see? Son, Mom hasn't been eating or sleeping well these few days. Every time I close my eyes, I dream of your grandmother coming to find Mom. Your grandmother told Mom, how can a grown man like you not get married? Your grandmother, chased after your mother with a walking stick. How tragic. Son, you don't like this or that. There isn't a single female that can catch your eye. Do you have a girl you fancy? If you fancy someone, you must bring her here for Mom to see. Don't worry, Mom definitely won't drag you down. I also guarantee to assist you. Think about it, my son. Mother, you've already met her, and you like her very much. You can't bear to let go of her, and you're always fighting with your son to hold her. If you see her again, you will definitely like her even more. A gentle breeze blew across the hillside, blowing his long black hair. A thin, pale white figure stood at the edge of the cliff for a long time, as if he could stand at the end of the world forever. Duan Xiaoxi's dividing line. Today, as soon as he opened his eyes, he heard the long-lost chirping of the sapling. Master Silver, Qiuqiu missed you so much. Arbor, who initially thought he was hearing things, blinked his eyes and suddenly cried out in joy, Ball, you guys? Master Silver, quickly come in. The star field this time will give you a huge surprise. A huge surprise? A trace of delight instantly rose in Xiao Mu's heart. A surprise that could catch Qiuqiu's eye must be super big. Even though she was standing outside now, she could still feel the divine power in the star field fluctuating. Her dantian seemed to have been injected with great vitality. Was there a new auxiliary star that had been activated? Arbor's body swayed, and a stretch of green mountains came into view. After a breath of fresh air, Sir Jojo quietly opened his eyes. He looked at everything in front of him with some surprise. Qiuqiu, is this the last of the 4 auxiliary stars? This information instantly appeared in Arbor's mind. Chapter 3942. More than that, Master. A dancing little tray ant ran over from a distance and said excitedly, Master, you're rich. Master, do you know what's buried in these mountains? Arbor looked at it with sparkling eyes with an expression that said, Hurry up and tell me, I'm listening. God's stone mine. That's not rare. The little tray ant waved its branches and laughed. The main thing is the holy vein. You can mine holy stones in the future for the Crown Prince and the others to use. Arbor's eyes lit up, and she nodded happily. That's great. Holy stone mine, she was happy when she heard it, and then she thought of the mine that Ancestor Chaiyang mentioned. She still had to find a time to dig it back so that she could be at ease. Master Silver, the little water child and the lump of dirt rolled over together, calling out loudly in succession. The two little ones jumped to her feet, pulled her skirt on both sides, and rolled up. Master, are you excited? Are you surprised? Chiu-Chiu, why did you say half and keep half? The little water child was excited. Master, do you know? We're really rich this time. Arbor looked at this guy expressionlessly. This guy talked for a long time, but he didn't get to the point. Master, the main star is open. After listening to the little water child and Chiu-Chiu's nonsense for a long time without getting to the point, the dirt lump couldn't hold it in anymore and quickly said. The little water child and Chiu-Chiu stared at it with their small eyes at the same time. Who told you to talk so much? They also wanted to tell Master about this. Arbor heard it and immediately became energetic. She glanced at the continuous mountains under her feet. I'll name this place Mountain Star. What do you think? Master, you have a good name. The little water child immediately flattered and raised both hands and feet in agreement without hesitation. The little dirt lump rolled to Arbor's neck and rubbed against it. Master, take us to the main star to have a look. After the main star was opened, the three of them felt a majestic power spread out from the main star. Once something got close, it would be pushed away. In other words, the main planet seemed to only welcome its master, Jojo, and did not like foreign contact at all. All right. Arbor nodded and immediately put the three on his body. Just as he was about to move, he suddenly saw a small vortex appear beside him. In an instant, Mo Lien appeared beside her with a smile on her face. Jojo, you're back. Arbor jumped forward, grabbed his hand, and said delightedly, just in time. Come with me to the main planet. Mo Lien was stunned. She looked up at the mountains around her. Isn't this a new planet? Why, two this time. Arbor nodded, held his hand, and said, the main star is also open. Chiu-Chiu said that even they can't enter the main planet. Only I can take you in. The little lady's slightly tsundere expression made Mo Lien want to laugh. A long time ago, the little girl had to rely on Chiu-Chiu to enter the star sector. Now that she knew that Chiu-Chiu and the others could not enter the main planet and had to rely on her to bring them in, she immediately felt satisfied. Lotus, who was observant, immediately nodded and praised, my Jojo is the best. Jojo, quickly take us in to have a look. The environment of the main planet must be very good. Arbor nodded. This time, she did not keep them in suspense and pulled Mo Lien's hand. Chapter 3943. Arbor carried little water child, soil lump, and Chiu-Chiu. With a thought, he immediately appeared on the main planet. What entered his sight was a winding jade river that was green like water but not water. It was like a jade belt river that slowly extended into the distance. It was a dragon. It was not a dragon. It was a half-liquid dragon that was glowing with pearls and was as graceful as a stream. As the breeze blew in, everyone smelled a refreshing fragrance that was extremely pleasant to the nose. Arbor held Mo Lien's hand and ran forward. He lowered his head and looked at the flowing light under his feet. Wow, what is this? Little water child had a surprised expression on his face. He stretched out his little arms and legs and ran forward. Look at it, it's so delicious. That soft crystal rippled with a natural green color. Just looking at it would greatly increase one's appetite. Jade dragon? This term suddenly popped up in Arbor's mind, and his eyes lit up with excitement. It was a jade dragon. It could be used to refine pills. If it was dug out and eaten directly, it would only be a small amount. The size of a fingernail was equivalent to the effect of 10 divinity pills. If it was used to refine saint-level pills to increase the cultivation of the transcendent realm, the little girl's eyes lit up as she turned to look at her husband. Do you want to try it? Let's each have a spoonful. Yay, yay. Before Mo Lien could reply, Chio and the little water child had already danced and cheered loudly on the other end. Arbor curled his lips and took out 4 small spoons from his inner world and handed them to each of them. He took another one and held it in his hand. Then, 2 big ones and 3 small ones stood at one end of the Jasper Heaven Jade Dragon. They stared at the jade-like object that was as green as a stream. "Master, it's time to eat," Chio shouted and was the first to run over. He used a small spoon to dig out a piece and immediately put it into his mouth, chewing it. When the others saw this, they naturally did not want to fall behind. They quickly dug out a small spoonful and swallowed it. "Master, it's so delicious." "Master, can I have another spoonful?" "No." Arbor quickly shook his head. "You can only eat 1 spoonful every 7 days. It wasn't that he couldn't bear to let them eat more, but the medicinal power of this thing was too fierce. If they ate too much, it would impact the strength in their bodies. Eating less nourishment would accumulate over time, and it would be of great benefit to his advancement in the future. Afraid that the saplings would not understand and secretly eat it behind his back, Sir Jojo hurriedly said, "This Jasper Sky Jade Dragon is good, but you can't eat too much of it. If you eat too much, your body won't be able to take it. The impact will tear you apart from the inside. Because your essence, energy, and spirit can't keep up with this kind of violent increase in speed. If you increase too quickly, it will cause the divine power in your body to become chaotic. Explode." The little tray ant obediently put down the spoon and nodded its little head with a serious expression. Jojo didn't know what was going on with Lotus, but Sir Jojo himself felt that his realm had loosened a little. If he immediately went into seclusion now, he should be able to advance by a small realm. This was only a small spoonful of Jasper Sky Jade Dragon. A certain someone was excited and wanted to take a good look at the situation of this main planet, so he put aside the matter of advancing in realm. "Come, let's walk further in. I have a very familiar feeling." Arbor pulled Emolien's hand and quickened his pace, following the direction of the Jasper Sky Jade Dragon. She had definitely been to this place before. The 8th night watch ended. Chapter 3944. Arbor's anxious mood immediately infected Emolien and the 3 little ones. The Crown Prince's hands drooped slightly and allowed his little wife to hold his hand. He was almost running forward. The Jade Dragon was emerald green, winding its way to a courtyard that was surrounded by fresh flowers and blooming green flowers. It gently embraced the entire courtyard. It was as if a pearl in the sea was being treated so gently. Xiao Mu slowly halted her steps and reflexively gripped her husband's fingers, her eyes glistening with moisture. Pushing open the courtyard door that was covered in green plants, it was as if she had pushed open a memory locked in the depths. Following the trail of medicinal fragrance, Xiao Mu slowly walked forward and stared fixedly at a tree in the middle of the courtyard. "Master, will I grow tall?" "Of course you'll grow tall. You're 7 years old now. Let's plant this osmanthus tree. 10 years later, you'll be 17 years old, and it'll be 10 years old. 10 years will pass in the blink of an eye. By then, you'll have grown up, and I'll be old as well. Then little treasure will make you beauty pills. This way, Master will never grow old." Arbor stared at the tree in a daze. Her little hand could not help but touch it and gently caress the bark. The moment she raised her head, a breeze blew past her face. The fragrance of osmanthus and the fine petals were scattered. This place seemed to carry too many of her memories. As a result, with every step she took, she seemed to be able to see those familiar figures smiling and waving at her. Arbor pushed open the door of the room and stood quietly at the door. She looked at her gorgeous and dignified boudoir. Her fingers touched the long screen window engraved with green bamboo and the blooming autumn moon begonia in front of the window. She gently swept the spotless windowsill and touched the beauty couch in front of the window. Her gaze was fixed outside the window. She watched quietly and almost didn't blink. Swords are murder weapons. The moment you draw your sword, you should realize this. Disciple, villains like to talk a lot of nonsense. When we subdue the enemy, don't be long-winded with them. Making them shut up forever is the best choice. I point my sword at the sky. What can the sky do to me? She stood there, looking out the window with a calm expression. It was as if she could see two incomparably beautiful figures, faintly discernible, like butterflies flying through flowers. Two swords clashed rapidly, making clanging sounds. She moved her gaze away from the screen and walked out. Her small hand gently pushed open the door to the study next door and walked in. She walked over and looked at the two writing desks, one big and one small. She obediently sat in front of the small writing desk and stroked the paper in front of her. There were 2 drops of ink on it, and a crooked word was written on it. Joe. It was as if she could see the years when the woman gently held her little hand that was almost transparent and white, writing stroke by stroke on the rice paper. Master, Uncle Master. The little girl choked with sobs and cried out. Her tears fell with a plop, staining the 2 ink stains. Prince Mo had been silently following behind her. Seeing her like this, he hurriedly went up to hold her shoulder and asked softly, Jojo, did you remember something? I remembered a lot. Arbor choked and said softly, I don't know why my soul exploded. But after my soul exploded, I know where I went. My soul is drifting away with the wind. Chapter 39:45. On that day, at that moment, in that gloomy forest where no light could be seen, I met my master and martial uncle. It was as if everything was predestined. Arbor walked to the cabinet beside the desk and glanced at the furnishings on it. Suddenly, she reached out and took a square golden box. She opened the lid of the box and her gaze fell on the golden beans that were neatly arranged in a row. Sir Jojo slowly reached out and picked up a golden bean. Suddenly, he threw it out of the window. Bang! After a sound was heard, a terrifying power suddenly burst out from the golden bean. A golden statue that was more than 10 meters tall suddenly appeared at the window. Arbor hugged the golden box tightly. Her eyes moved slightly and fixed on the golden statue. Golden basket, golden beans. It's been a long time. Sir Jojo turned to look at Emolien, who was standing beside him and staring at him intently. He held her hand. Do you want to take a look at my treasure trove? Emolien was really shocked this time. There's more. Wow, his wife was so rich. Even he felt a sense of pressure. Who do you think my master and Uncle Master are? Arbor waved her hand. A row of reveal talismans slid out from her sleeve and landed behind the small house. The tranquil air trembled slightly. Then a patch of green appeared in the distance. Mountains and rivers appeared layer by layer in front of everyone like a painting that was being pushed open. An extremely majestic palace was also like a veil that was being pulled open. Bit by bit, from the sharp corners of the eaves to the picturesque corridors, and then the entire enormous palace suddenly appeared. The 3 little ones behind Emolien looked at the visual shock in front of them and exclaimed in unison. Xiao Mu clapped her small hands, and her lips involuntarily curled into a smile. She pointed at the Hall of Longevity's plaque and asked, Chiu, transplant the longevity tree here, okay? This place is rich in divine power. Other planets can't compare to it. If we plant the longevity tree here, it'll definitely bear many fruits. Arbor nodded in satisfaction. Holding her husband's hand, she ran all the way inside. Entering the longevity palace, their eyes were filled with small balls of light. Little by little, they were as bright as stars. They hung high above the palace and emitted a soft light. Wow, are those all seals? The little water child grabbed Arbor's skirt and climbed up. He sat high up and looked up at the balls of light above the dome. Xiao Mu flew up and grabbed one of the light orbs with her small, fair hand. She peeled off the outer layer of light and took out a cyan light short sword. After brandishing it a few times, she floated to the ground and walked to Emolien's side with her sleeves fluttering. Hubby, this is for you. Xiao Mu blinked her large eyes as she presented that green-edged short sword to Emolien. Good sword. Emolien's eyes flickered. She raised her hand and took the short sword. She swiped it in the air and a long strand of hair was cut from the middle. It floated to the ground and flew far away. This is? Emolien's eyes flickered. She reached out and touched the short sword. Her eyes were slightly shocked. This short sword was made too perfectly. There were 3 pieces of gemstones on the hilt, but she could feel the flow of energy in them. Speed up, attack speed, and also a strange power. Mo Lien tested it out with the short sword, and his figure instantly flashed to a location 10 meters away. Chapter 3946. The Crown Prince's eyes flashed with shock as he looked at his wife. The power of space? Arbor nodded her head like a chick pecking at rice. Does my husband like it? This is the origin returning weapon made by Martial Uncle. She paused and tilted her head. That's right. It's equivalent to a holy weapon here. As expected of a master's product. The Crown Prince sighed at his own inferiority. Jojo's master was too powerful. Just the crafting of this dagger was enough to show how powerful he was. Wife. The Crown Prince flashed to Xiao Mu's side and pulled her into his embrace. He nuzzled against her and said, "Hubby will like whatever you give hubby." Jojo blinked. "Where's the dog poop?" Mo Lien was speechless. Why was this little guy such a killjoy? Shouldn't her husband be smiling shyly at him and then pouncing on him for a kiss when he was whispering sweet nothings? Arbor was obviously in a good mood. She tugged on Mo Lien's arm and revealed a rare smile. "I'm just kidding. Why would I give you dog poop? You're Jojo's Ren, the most important person to Jojo. Jojo will give you anything you like." The little guy hooked his arm and dragged him to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was even more dazzling. It was gorgeous and stunning. Rows of colorful medicine bottles floated in front of them. Each color was arranged in a small square and there were about 1,000 bottles of each type. Arbor held her husband's hand and rummaged through the floor for a long time. She ran to the shelves against the wall and took out a box. She opened it and took out a fragrant lollipop. Mo Lien leaned over and couldn't help but suppress his smile. This box of lollipops that children love to eat was most likely given by Jojo's martial uncle to coax the children. Arbor unwrapped the thin candy wrapper and licked it. She turned to look at her husband. "Husband, do you want some?" Mo Lien nodded reluctantly. "If you want to feed me, I can consider it." Arbor snorted and rolled his eyes at him. He then brought the candy to his lips. "This isn't candy. It's medicine." She pulled on his sleeve and dragged him up another floor. This floor was mostly filled with materials. Half of the floor was filled with medicinal herbs, while the other half was filled with refining materials. It was a dazzling sight, making one unable to take their eyes off it. After reading all this, Mo Lien couldn't help but silently close her mouth. Her voice was unhurried as she said, "Your master and martial uncle are indeed extraordinary." Such a grand arrangement simply made people gasp in amazement. Sir Jojo glanced at him and said dryly, "I stole some too." Mo Lien, the two of them walked hand in hand to the 4th floor of the main hall. Chio's green wooden face was now completely expressionless. Compared to her master's wealth accumulation methods, her master and martial uncle seemed to be on a higher level. Sure enough, it was passed down from generation to generation. Arbor stood on the 1st floor, her eyes rippling slightly. She looked up at the balls of light and seemed to be searching for something. Compared to the first 2 floors, the medicine and materials were arranged neatly and orderly. On this floor, the balls of light of various sizes floated up and down, appearing much more disorderly. Looking at his wifey's happy face as she shuttled back and forth between the balls of light, Mo Lien pursed his lips and smiled slightly. Digging for treasures was indeed the most suitable thing for his wifey. Arbor slowly approached 2 of the balls of light. Chapter 3947. She reached out and took it down, her eyes filled with warmth and gentleness. Arbor stared deeply at the little thing wrapped in the 2 halos and reached out to touch it. But very quickly, her hand was repelled by the power of the seal. "This is..." Mo Lien walked forward and looked at the snow-white thing inside the seal. She saw a small snow-white thing curled up inside, but she couldn't see its face. Arbor put down her little hand and sighed softly. When I first met Master cut it out from its dying mother's body. It was born before a month, and its congenital deficiency made it grow very slowly." Arbor said lightly. "It's a white unicorn, very beautiful. It was rare for the little guy to praise something beautiful. Mo Lien heard this and raised her eyebrows vigilantly. Then this is? Mo Lien's gaze fell on the other ball of light. The little beast inside was a little strange. Its body was about the same size as the little unicorn, but its whole body emitted a strange 5-colored light. Red, yellow, blue, green, and purple. The 5 light colors alternated one after another, and it looked very strange. Xiao Mu placed her hand on the seal, and this time, she quickly carried the little beastie out from inside. The corner of his mouth held a trace of a smile, and subconsciously, Lord Jojo made a gesture of poking its fleshy body. The little beast moved its body and blinked its watery eyes. It lazily raised its little head. When its gaze met with Arbor's, it was first stunned, then almost immediately jumped up, whining as it quickly pounced on Arbor's face. Arbor calmly reached out to block in front of his eyes, and pulled down the reckless 5-colored treasure beast. Her pair of big eyes were bright and sparkling. Arbor reached out and poked its round body, his eyes full of interest. Even though Mo Lien was experienced and knowledgeable, she had never seen such a little beast. She couldn't help but tug at Jojo's little hand. "Jojo, did you also pick up this little beast in the past?" Arbor thought for a moment, then nodded vigorously and said, "It's called the 5-colored treasure beast. Feed it herbs, and it can spit out pills. Feed it ancient jade, and it can spit out jadeite and the like." Mo Lien nodded. "If that's the case, it's really a strange little thing." Whimper. The little beast rolled around in Arbor's arms happily, a pair of black eyes staring straight at Arbor for a long time. Arbor couldn't help but raise his hand to stroke its round and chubby little body, and poked it, his little hand to its chin. The chubby little fellow immediately revealed a bitter expression and rolled back and forth in her arms. Arbor didn't pay it any mind and poked it again. The 5-colored treasure beast immediately pulled a long face and spat out a pill, pretending to be exhausted, and went limp in her hand. Arbor couldn't help but laugh. He picked up a ball-shaped leaf and waved it in front of it. Little Treasure's eyes immediately lit up. "Stop pretending," the little stoic said aloofly as she reached out to feed it. "You used to lie to me that I was young, so I fell for your trick." She raised her hand to pinch its furry little body. "Now I know that with your current abilities, it's a cinch for you to spit out 100 pills at a time." Little Treasure shook its little body, revealing a hopeless expression. Arbor pursed his lips. Little Masta seemed to be even scarier than before. Little Treasure started to worry deeply about the safety of its life. Chapter 3948. Xiao Mu curled her lips as she looked at that lifeless furry face. She raised her hand to gently stroke its furry head. "You don't need to worry. Your master has given me as many pills as you want. I won't let you puke like a dog so easily." "You're not a dog." Arbor's little face darkened. "I said you're a little dog and you're freaking panting?" Little Treasure looked at its little master in confusion. "I didn't bark?" Xiao Mu blinked and cast a glance at the ground. She saw 3 little puppies rushing over at some point and circling around her. Didn't they say that no external objects could get close to her main planet? What were these 3 doing? Were these 3 dogs or not? Xiao Mu couldn't figure it out no matter how hard she racked her brains. Seeing those 3 hopping over and biting her skirt, the little fellow helplessly swung her legs before poking Little Treasure again, causing it to pitifully spit out 2 more pills. She gathered 3 pills and threw them to the 3 little fellows. The 3 little puppies were satisfied. Arbor glanced at the top floor of the palace and said hesitantly to Mo Lien, "Let's go out first." Prince Mo nodded. His little wife held his hand and led him out of the magnificent palace. Xiao Mu's finger twitched, and it didn't take her long to drag the rowdy crowd to her side. "Why is there a palace here? Little sister-in-law, what is this place? We couldn't even enter this planet just now." Limitless Blade and the others were yelling, causing the little fellow to feel a little uncomfortable. "Too noisy." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal closed his fan with a smile and smacked the back of Dao Wuji's head. "Shut up." Then he blinked and looked at Jojo. "Jojo, is this the main planet?" This place is indeed rich in divine power. The Peony Fairy said. Even Fish Orchid Planet and Forest Planet can't compare to the density of divine power here. The little fellow was speechless. She glanced at them and thought of something. You guys seem to, what if he had advanced? Fairy Ginkgo nodded her head and said with a smile, that Phoenix Spring is indeed a good place. Now that the Saint energy has been depleted, but when we came out, we found that the place could slowly generate Saint energy on its own. I should be able to recover in about 10 days. Holy Sun Mi Yen smiled and nodded. It is indeed a good place. Jojo was a little embarrassed. Speaking of the Phoenix Spring, she felt a little guilty. It was not that she had to take the Phoenix clan's treasure, but the situation was critical. He Chen and the others were all cultivating in the Phoenix Spring. If he did not capture them in time and bring them back to the forest planet, they would all sink to the bottom of the water. Jojo, let's go. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal tilted his head and glanced at Mo Lien, who looked like a door god. Prince Mo casually glanced back and snorted. Dao Wuji asked curiously, what's in this palace? It was a grand sight, so there must be something extraordinary inside. Don't worry about the palace for now. If Jojo doesn't go there, he'll turn the world upside down. Arbor blinked in confusion. What's the matter? Let's go to the forest planet. He-Chen's mouth twitched in amusement. Your 800 gold figures are about to fight with someone. Arbor was very puzzled. With a wave of her hand, she and the others arrived at the forest planet. The Phoenix Spring was currently shrouded in layers of faint halos. Arbor subconsciously reached out to touch it, but her fingers were pushed away by a repelling force. Before the Saint energy recovers, the Phoenix Spring cannot be opened. Chapter 3949. Arbor nodded and tilted her head to listen. There seemed to be the sound of wind whistling nearby, accompanied by the sounds of birds chirping. The little fellow was astonished and hastily ran with everyone to a hillside behind Phoenix Spring. At first glance, it really was quite lively. The 800 gold figures that she had casually stored inside were currently pacing back and forth on the hillside. To be precise, they were fighting a group battle with two beasts, one black and one purple, that were shrieking fiercely in the air. The purple was bewitching, while the black was pure. The two beasts fluttered their long tail feathers as they flew back and forth in the air, sometimes high and sometimes low. There was also a little white squirrel joining in the fun on the side. It raised its tail and whipped it from time to time as it stared at the two birds flying back and forth in the air, chirping angrily. Rustle, rustle, rustle. With a light movement, a little white snake suddenly darted out from the underbrush, the little golden crown on its head shining brightly under the sunlight. Arbor's footsteps quickened, and she hastily reached out to catch the little white snake that flew over with a swish. A faint smile curled on her lips. Ming Ming, you're awake. The little white snake happily rolled around in the little stoic's hands. Mo Lien and Jichen couldn't help but frown and roll their eyes when they saw its appearance. Please, you're a proper holy beast. Don't act cute every time you see a little girl. The little white snake had previously swallowed a divine beast and entered a state of deep sleep to advance. Right now, it was very obvious that it had reached the peak of the late stage of the growth stage. Even the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had to think twice before going up against such a powerful holy beast. You have the nerve to act cute? Acting cute every time you see a little girl. What's going on? Mo Lien and Jichen didn't say anything, but they both secretly ridiculed it in their hearts. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The little white squirrel abruptly lifted its chubby little legs and swung its tails. It angrily rushed over from the hillside and jumped into Arbor's arms. Chirp, 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 chirp. It pointed at the hillside in exasperation, then pointed at the things flying in the sky. Mo Lien's face darkened. My wife's holy beasts didn't like to transform and didn't like to speak human language either. What should I do? Arbor looked up and saw the blazing blood phoenix flying over. At this moment, it was fanning itself with the purple and black blazing blood phoenix. Alas! Xiao Mu sighed with a headache. She took small steps and led the crowd of onlookers who didn't mind the commotion to the front of the hill. She grumpily hollered, All of you, stop. Screech. The green phoenix boy, who was shooting from the side, flew to Arbor's shoulder and stood still. He pecked his feathers, jumped, and chirped complaining. Arbor! Exclamation point. You're all full of energy, aren't you? The little fellow gave them a meaningful look. The beasts standing in a row involuntarily shuddered, and their adorable eyes looked at Xiao Mu docilely. They all looked like they were saying, I'm obedient. If you have nothing to do, you'll go to the peak star to mine from tomorrow onwards. Arbor glanced at the water kid and the dirt lump beside him. You two will be supervisors. The two raised their hands and feet in agreement. Chiu looked gratified. Master, the peak star is currently filled with divine stone mines on the surface, but there are many hidden veins. If we dig them out, we'll be rich. Once the holy veins appear, holy power will flow out. When the time comes, it'll be beneficial to the cultivation of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others. The little girl nodded, indicating that she understood. She glanced sideways at the indignant blazing blood phoenix. Did you hear that? Where's the big ape? Chapter 3950. Don't think I didn't notice you flying into the sky from time to smash the two birds' bananas. Don't you think it's too much of a waste of food to smash them with food? Don't hide behind and watch the show. Go and dig with them tomorrow. The gorilla who flew over to meet the unexpected calamity instantly showed a hopeless expression, feeling that he had been tricked by the little girl. Please, he had just completed his advancement and had stolen half a day of leisure. Why was he being sent to mine again? After Arbor finished scolding these non-stop troublemakers, she turned her gaze to the two phoenix-like birds, one black and one purple. They were slightly slimmer than phoenixes. With a wave of her hand, the two Baing, who had shrunk to the size of a sparrow, hurriedly swooped down and jumped in front of the little girl, flapping their wings. Arbor punched one of the black Baing's head. Little black, little purple, why are you causing trouble as soon as you come out? The two Baing, who were called Little Black and Little Purple, looked at each other in confusion. So, their names had been decided by the little Master Silver just like that? Wasn't it a little too casual? Mo Lien forcibly suppressed the smile at the corner of his mouth. Regarding his wife's habit of naming things based on their colors, Crown Prince Lien had no choice. Mo Lien patted his wife's head with a smile in his eyes. Mountain Star's terrain is continuous and undulating, and it's covered by the aurora. Many hidden mineral veins are hidden deep in the mountains. It's indeed a good idea to let a few idle and moldy sacred beasts mine, so that they wouldn't have to keep staring at his wife when they had nothing to do. Heh. All the beasts looked hopeless. Arbor pursed her lips and patted Little Purple's head as if coaxing a child. You two just came out of your eggshells, so you have to get along well with your little friends. Don't make a fuss. You can't fight either. Otherwise, I'll cook you. Arbor expressionlessly turned around and muttered to herself with her hands behind her back, I've never eaten phoenix meat. The birds shook their little bodies and drooped their little heads in unison. Arbor suddenly raised his hand and threw out several green, sparkling and round pearls. She compressed the paste of the jade dragon into a bead shape and put some of it into a small box, making it easier to carry and distribute. Apart from the three puppies, it seemed that no one else could enter the main planet at will. Since that was the case, Arbor did not have to worry about one of them exploding and dying because of their greed for the Jasper Sky Dragon. Carrying the three puppies and stepping out of the star field, Arbor faintly said, Remember to mine. The beasts, big and small, looked at each other and revealed a bitter expression at the same time. The life of a beast is so difficult. After Xiao Mu exited the star domain and blocked out those noisy voices, she herded the three little puppies into the court to play. She pulled Emolien's hand and said, I'll go in tonight to advance. After that, I'll refine the pill. It'll probably take 3 to 7 days. Don't worry, I'll come out when the time comes. Emolien nodded obediently and reached out to hug his wife. Don't worry, I'll take care of things outside. The two of them walked around the main planet for so long, but only 2 hours had passed in the outside world. After breakfast, Jojo Sama wanted to go back to her parents' home. Prince Mo naturally accompanied her back. Just as they walked to the entrance of the East Palace, They heard a servant report that King Zheng and his wife wanted to see them. Chapter 3951. The young couple couldn't help but stare blankly at each other. Why would Mo Shikong and his wife suddenly come to visit? It was really strange. Speaking of which, they had a grudge with King Zheng because of his brother, Su Shihua. Su Shihua was beaten up by Sir Jojo in the Royal College and was sprayed with golden dragon flames. He wouldn't survive if he was carried home. When they heard that Su Shihua died in King Zheng's residence, the couple didn't pay attention to the matter. Whether this person died or not, it had nothing to do with her. In any case, she had left him alive at that time. It could be considered a favor to the old emperor. That was what Xiao Qiao thought. As for what the emperor thought, it didn't seem to matter. So annoying. Sir Jojo pursed his lips. He still wanted to go home and eat his mother's cooking. With Mo Shikong and his wife stirring things up, it seemed like his plan to go home today would be ruined. Arbor and Mo Lien walked to the front of the carriage and saw two eunuchs leading Mo Shikong and his wife over. The ordinary-looking consort Jing, Shi Yongyan, had a smile on her face. When she saw Arbor, she took the initiative to greet him. "Greetings, Crown Prince and Crown Princess." Arbor curled his lips and a faint sharpness flashed across his eyes. This ordinary-looking consort Jing looked ordinary, but her scheming mind couldn't be compared to that idiotic second sister of hers. After what she did to the Shi family, the compensation nearly emptied the entire Shi family. He didn't expect to see this eldest miss again and greet him with such a calm attitude. If it were someone else, they would have exploded long ago. Arbor nodded slightly and glanced at Shi Yongyan without saying a word. "What's the matter, Brother Zheng?" Mo Lien spoke. King Zheng cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I came abruptly. Please forgive me, Crown Prince. I thought that Brother King Zheng would be busy cultivating in the academy during this period of time. The academy's Heavenly Yuan Rankings finals were about to begin. Given King Zheng's character, he should value the resources he had. He did not seem like someone who would waste a lot of time accompanying Princess Consort Zheng around the sovereign capital." King Zheng smiled faintly. "I can cultivate whenever I want, but Madam's birthday is near. I still have to spend more time with Madam." "Oh? Brother Zheng, what brings you here?" King Zheng took out an invitation from his pocket. "It's Madam's birthday. I hope that the Crown Prince and sister-in-law can come and have a chat." A dim light flashed in Prince Mo's eyes. He politely took the post and read it. 3 days later? A hint of hesitation appeared on his face. Jojo would need 3 to 5 to 7 days to level up and refine the soul-returning pill. He didn't know if Jojo would come out in 3 days. Princess Consort Zheng chuckled. "Is there a problem?" Sir Jojo blinked and pulled down Mo Lien's hand, nodding. "Since Brother Zheng and sister-in-law personally invited us, the Crown Prince and I will naturally show up on time. King Zheng was the Crown Prince's foster brother after all. It would seem too unreasonable to not show up since he personally came to invite them." The little girl naturally didn't wish for someone to gossip behind the Crown Prince's back and ruin his reputation. Seeing the little girl's actions, Princess Consort Zheng's eyes flickered rapidly. The Crown Prince did not agree, but the little girl directly agreed. It could be seen that this girl always had her own opinions in front of His Highness. The Crown Prince turned to glance at the little stoic and nodded with a smile. "Remember to vote early today. See you tomorrow, chirp." Chapter 3952. After leaving the Eastern Palace, Princess Consort Zheng sat in the carriage in silence. "What are you thinking about?" His Highness the Crown Prince dotes on the Crown Princess so much. No wonder there's a rumor in the capital that it's easy to provoke the Crown Prince, but the Crown Princess will suffer. Just by looking at the Crown Princess' unbridled attitude in front of His Highness, one could tell how important this little girl was to His Highness. Mo Shikong looked up and coldly swept a glance at his wife. "Are you envious?" Princess Consort Zheng snorted softly and turned to look out the window. She said softly, "This concubine's life is already very good now. As long as that family stopped causing trouble for a few days, her life would actually be better." Speaking of which, the emperor really didn't mistreat this adopted son. This should be mainly on account of the unconscious Her Highness. Ordinary people often said, contentment is bliss. Not to mention people like them who lived in the prince's estate. Thinking of the Shi family, Shi Yongyan couldn't help but sigh softly. It was obvious to all what happened to her second sister. There were some people that he couldn't afford to offend just because he wanted to. Princess Consort Zheng was a smart person. She knew what to do and what not to do. He lowered his eyebrows and a gloomy expression appeared on his ordinary face. Prince Consort Zheng glanced at her and then looked away. His mood was a bit more irritable. Back then, he had married the eldest daughter of the Shi family mainly because he valued the Shi family. Otherwise, with the Shi family's daughter's talent and appearance, how could he have taken a liking to her? But now, the Shi family was stepped on by the little crown princess and scared out of their wits. It looked like they wouldn't be able to get up again. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't disappointed. Mo Shikong knitted his brows tightly. It wasn't that he wanted to fight for anything. It was just that in his position, he didn't advance but retreated instead. Sometimes, one had to advance in life. Husband, you'd better remind that family not to provoke the crown princess that day, Princess Consort Zheng said faintly. Otherwise, no one would be able to save them. Anger flashed in Mo Shikong's eyes. What family? They are your in-laws and sister-in-law. After her second brother left, that family had been causing trouble all day long. Shi Yongyan slightly lowered her head in disdain and was too lazy to say anything. In any case, she had already reminded them. It was up to them whether they followed her instructions or not. If they insisted on courting death in front of the crown prince, reality would teach them a lesson. The little crown princess had just arrived at the entrance of Chengel North Street when the Qiao family, who had heard the commotion, hurriedly opened the courtyard door and ran out to welcome her. When Wei Ziqin saw her daughter's carriage coming over, she hurriedly pulled her husband over and asked with a smile, "How was it, daughter? Did you encounter any danger on this trip to Phoenix Grove?" As he spoke, he saw the crown prince and the young crown princess getting off the carriage hand in hand. His eyes kept looking back and forth between the two of them. "Mother, what could have happened?" Arbor helplessly grabbed his mother's hand and pulled her into the courtyard. "How's the family these days?" Ever since the Shi family's misfortune, everyone in the imperial capital knew to avoid the young crown prince consort's residence and not provoke them. If the young crown prince consort decided to teach someone a lesson, she would make that person's balls hurt for the rest of their lives. The unlucky Shi family had now become paupers. Just the compensation alone had nearly emptied their family's savings. Not to mention the extent of being scared out of their wits. Chapter 3953. She reckoned that whenever the head of the Shi family closed his eyes, he would think of the little fellow's fiendish stoic face. Who knows, maybe he wouldn't be able to sleep well for several days straight. Mo Lian stepped forward to salute, and the Qiao family quickly pulled her away. Everyone chatted and laughed with the two people as they walked up the steps to the main entrance. However, they heard a clamor coming from the end of Chengel North Street. Many passers-by hurriedly ran over, and some busybodies even shouted, "Hurry, hurry and take a look. The Lin family's miss is going to whip someone to death on the street." Wei Ziqin frowned and looked into the distance. They had been in the capital for many days. Chengel North Street was close to the Imperial Palace, and it was bustling with people coming and going. The security was also very good. After living here for so long, she had never heard of anyone waving a whip on the street. Seeing her mother's unhappy expression, Arbor took her hand and said, "Mother, how about we go over and take a look?" Wei Ziqin hesitated. She didn't want to cause trouble for her daughter and son-in-law, but the clamor in the distance seemed to be getting louder and louder. She couldn't pretend that she didn't hear it. "That's fine, let's go over and see what's going on." Mo Lian nodded with a smile, but he cast a glance behind him. In the blink of an eye, a shadow slid past the corner of the wall and sprinted towards the source of the sound. The Qiao residence was only a few minutes' walk away from the scene of the disturbance. Qiao Zhongbang, second Uncle Qiao, and the others all followed. Arbor supported his mother and turned to look at second Aunt Ren. "Xiao Yao should be 5 months pregnant, right? Is her body well?" Madame Ren nodded with a smile. She's doing very well. She's been taking the nutrient solution that Xiao Xiao gave her previously on time. Now, Xiaoyao's complexion looks rosy, and she's walking very energetically. Arbor nodded, appearing to be in a very good mood. In 4 more months, she would be able to have a little nephew and niece. The family chatted and laughed, and it was very lively. In a few minutes, they arrived at the scene of the disturbance. Quite a few people had already gathered there. They were whispering to each other, and some were secretly pointing at the center of the crowd. Arbor glanced at the words and his expression turned cold. Wei Ziqin and Madame Ren were even more shocked, and a trace of anger appeared in their eyes. He saw an arrogant woman standing in the middle of the circle. She was holding a black whip in her hand, and she was whipping a pair of mother and son in ragged clothes. In a flash, a shadow guard appeared beside the crown prince and reported the information he had gathered in a low voice. Master, this subordinate found out that this pair of beggar mother and son bumped into Miss Lin's horse when they were walking, causing her beloved horse to be frightened and almost fall off. So, Arbor's eyes immediately turned cold. Qiao Zhongbang and second Uncle Qiao furrowed their brows in anger. How can there be such a rude and unreasonable woman? This is Miss Lin from Rong City's Lin family, the shadow guard said in a low voice. Mo Lien knitted his brows as he instructed that hidden guard apathetically, go teach her a lesson. Just leave her with her last breath. The shadow guard cupped his hands and was about to move when he saw a stone fly through the air and hit Miss Lin's small hand that was waving the whip. Lin Miao immediately felt a piercing pain on the back of her hand. She grimaced and almost dropped the whip on the ground. Who dares to go against my Rong City's Lin family? What an unruly and domineering woman. In the blink of an eye, another stone flew through the air. Chapter 3954. With a smack, it struck Lin Miao's shoulder again. Furthermore, this rock was even more ferocious than the previous one, causing Lin Miao to involuntarily retreat several steps. Lin Miao clutched her bleeding shoulder, and the whip in her hand also fell to the ground with a smack. Her bloodshot gaze roamed back and forth before suddenly fixing on the little stoic in the crowd. She pointed at her in exasperation and shouted, "You again!" The little stoic? Xiao Zhongbang and the others looked at her in astonishment. How could they not know if their daughter had made a move? They were standing next to the little fellow and completely didn't see her make a move. Besides, the crown prince had already sent the shadow guards to teach this woman a lesson, so why should the little crown princess expend the mental and physical effort to teach this arrogant woman a lesson? Not every idiot had the chance to be taught a lesson by Sir Jojo. For example, this delicate guest from Chengdu's Lin family seemed like an arrogant patient who was always at odds with beggars. How did beggars become your whole family? Did she have to act like this? Arbor lowered his gaze and cast an indifferent glance, disinclined to reprimand this woman. She recognized who this woman was with a single glance. Chengdu's Lin family gave her an extremely bad impression. What kind of playthings came out of the family? She dared to boast shamelessly that she wanted to develop herself in the imperial capital? Could she develop herself? In any case, her husband would teach her how to behave. There was no need for Sir Jojo to do anything unnecessary. Preposterous. Mo Lien waved her hand coldly. That shadow guard immediately nodded and landed in front of Lin Miao with a whoosh. Only then did Lin Miao feel a sense of impending disaster. She stared vigilantly at the shadow guard in front of her and involuntarily exclaimed, "What are you doing?" That shadow guard didn't respond to her and directly grabbed her arm, lifting her up like a little chick. He squeezed, causing Lin Miao to spin several times on the spot. Lin Miao instantly felt stifled by the other party's strength. She spun several times on the spot, feeling somewhat unwell. "Do you know who I am?" Lin Miao shrieked. Before she could say anything, her mouth was hit by another rock. This time, she was done for. She actually knocked out a tooth beside her. Lin Miao stared at her tooth on the ground in horror and shrieked in exasperation, "I'm going to kill you! I'm going to kill you! You actually dare!" After getting hit by another rock in her stomach, Lin Miao curled up in pain. Her pair of venomous eyes glared in Xiao Mu's direction. By this time, arbors, muir, mioer, and mures, mewers, lin, mie, mioer, mie, mure, lin, mioa, mie, mioer, this to mewers. And with muer, lin, mioer, to lin mie to fourths to lin mioer and lin and fourth, Princess Wushuang? The commoners in the crowd suddenly called out. Princess Wushuang has returned from the border town? Ah, no wonder she's so nimble. It's not surprising that she's Princess Wushuang. Arbor blinked and looked curiously at the red-clothed woman, only to see her suddenly turn her head and wave at her and Emo Lien with a smile. Chapter 3955. Arbor was momentarily dazzled. This girl's eyes were too pure and clean. Her small face couldn't be said to be very beautiful, but her eyes revealed a bit of decisiveness and determination, making her seem even more heroic than ordinary girls. When she revealed half of her porcelain-white teeth and waved her claws at them with a brilliant smile, even Arbor, who had a stoic face, couldn't resist the urge to smile at her. Emo Lien looked down and saw that his wifey was intentionally smiling at An Wushuang, and his mood instantly soured. He reflexively grasped the little fellow's small hand and glared warningly at An Wushuang with a taut face. The latter tilted her head at him and then turned around to chuckle at Lin Muir, who was covered in cuts and bruises from being hit by rocks. She clicked her tongue and said, "I haven't returned to the capital for a while. I wonder how such a character appeared in the capital." Commandery Princess, this is a young lady from Chengdu's Lin clan. A young man wearing thin black armor stepped forward and presented a document to Commandery Princess Wushuang with a solemn expression. Wushuang blinked and accepted the thick stack of documents. She couldn't resist face-palming this little brother. This punk, why was he so methodical in his work? She only asked him to inquire about this person's identity, but he had the time to give her this stack of documents. Did he want her to stand here and flip through them in the middle of the street? How could she have such an eccentric personal subordinate? Emo Lien curled his lips and quietly said to his wife, "She's called An Wushuang, the king of Jinyuan, and Sini's daughter. Although she doesn't look reliable, she still has some merit in guarding the borders." On the other side, An Wushuang had already heard him talking bad about her. She turned around and rolled her eyes at him. The little stoic pursed her lips. Emo Lien wasn't someone who would easily give any evaluation. If he could say something like, "Guarding the borders is not bad," it meant that his evaluation of Commandery Princess Wushuang was quite high. Commandery Princess? Commandery Princess Wushuang's subordinate, An Yang, looked back at his Commandery Princess in confusion. And Wushuang nodded helplessly at him, then put the stack of documents into her inner world. She coughed lightly and said, "Pick the important ones and tell me about them." Nodding his head, An Yang expressionlessly said, "The Lin family moved to Chengdu less than 3 months ago. Not long ago, they wantonly purchased the land in the suburbs of the capital and even had a conflict with a farmer, killing the entire family. A few days ago, when the sons of the Lin family were drinking at Spring Wind Pavilion, they took liberties with a female singer and forced her to commit suicide by jumping off a building. Miss Lin Muir doesn't like beggars. Before today, they once organized a group of young masters and young ladies to slaughter a group of beggars at the Mu family's mountain gate." "What nonsense are you spouting?" Lin Muir's piercing scream abruptly interrupted the guard's calm words. And Yang turned his head, looked at her expressionlessly, and ignored her. He turned back to his master and said, "Yesterday evening, the eldest son of the Lin family kidnapped a woman when he was shopping. That woman's husband went to the Lin family's door to seek justice, but was smashed with a bag of silver coins and was driven back with his tail between his legs. Everyone." Arbor hastily glanced at his husband, the accusation in his small eyes a bit obvious. "Why don't you know?" He sent a simple royal guard to investigate in passing. Look, he even figured out the Lin family's background. Emo Lien. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.